Story 1. My best friend was always badmouthing my boyfriend until I caught the two of them making out during a trip. My name is Riley, and I need to tell you this story because maybe it will save another woman from making the same mistakes I did. 3 years ago, I was that girl who believed in the goodness of people, who thought that if you just tried hard enough, everyone could get along. I was naive, trusting, and completely blind to the signs that were right in front of me. I had been with Marcus for 8 months when I decided that my best friend, Zoe, absolutely had to love him as much as I did. Seemed so simple in my mind. If they just spent more time together, she would see what an amazing person he was and stop making those little comments about how he wasn't good enough for me. So, I started inviting her over constantly. Every Friday night became dinner at my apartment with the three of us. I would spend hours planning the perfect meals, setting the table with candles, and choosing music that would create just the right atmosphere. I genuinely believed I was building something beautiful, bringing together the two most important people in my life. "Come on, Zoe," I would say, practically begging her to join us. "Just give him a chance. You'll see how funny he is once you really get to know him." She would always agree with this reluctant sigh, like she was doing me a huge favor. "Fine, but don't expect me to pretend I think he's perfect," she'd say, rolling her eyes. During these dinners, I would watch them like a hopeful matchmaker, jumping in whenever the conversation got tense, laughing a little too loudly at Marcus' jokes, desperately trying to show Zoe how wonderful he was. When they would sit in awkward silence, I convinced myself it was progress. At least they weren't arguing, right? I remember one particular evening when I had made Marcus' favorite pasta dish and spent the afternoon cleaning my apartment until it sparkled. Zoe arrived late, as usual, complaining about traffic while barely acknowledging Marcus. Throughout dinner, I kept steering the conversation toward topics I knew they both enjoyed: books, movies, travel dreams. "Marcus just read this amazing thriller," I said brightly. "The same author you love." "Zoe, tell her about it, babe." But instead of the connection I hoped for, Zoe just nodded politely and changed the subject. I didn't give up, though. After dinner, when I went to the kitchen to get dessert, I lingered a few extra minutes, hoping they would bond in my absence. When I returned, they were sitting quietly on opposite ends of the couch, both looking at their phones. "Everything okay?" I asked, setting down the chocolate cake I had spent 2 hours making. "Perfect," Zoe said with that smile I thought meant she was finally warming up to him. What I didn't know then was that those moments when I left them alone to answer the door, use the bathroom, or take a phone call were when everything was really happening. While I was orchestrating what I thought was the beginning of a beautiful friendship, I was actually creating the perfect opportunity for my own destruction. Looking back now, I can see how incredibly stupid I was. But at the time, I was just a girl in love who wanted her best friend to be happy for her. I had no idea that I was inviting a predator into my relationship, giving her unlimited access to study my boyfriend, learn his habits, and plan her attack. The irony is that I was so focused on making them like each other that I completely missed the fact that they were already developing their own relationship behind my back. The worst part about Zoe's performance was how convincing it was. Every time we had our group dinners, she would pick fights with Marcus about the most ridiculous things. She'd criticize his job, question his opinions, and challenge everything he said with this aggressive energy that made me cringe. "I just don't understand how someone can work in marketing," she'd say, her voice dripping with disdain. "It's basically lying to people for money, isn't it?" Marcus would get defensive, which I totally understood, and I'd jump in like a referee trying to keep the peace. "Zoe, that's not fair. Marcus helps small businesses reach their customers. He's actually helping people." These dinner arguments became so intense that I started getting anxiety attacks before our Friday nights. I'd call Marcus beforehand, practically begging him to be patient with her. "She's not usually like this," I'd explain, pacing around my apartment. "I think she's just protective of me. Once she realizes how good you are to me, she'll come around." Marcus would sigh on the other end of the line. "Riley, maybe we should stop doing these dinners. She clearly doesn't like me." "No," I'd protest. "That's exactly why we need to keep trying. She's my best friend, Marcus. I need her to approve of us." After each disastrous evening, Zoe would call me within hours, launching into detailed critiques of Marcus that left me feeling confused and defensive. Did you see how he talked to the waitress at lunch last week? Red flag, Riley. And the way he interrupts you when you're telling stories. A good boyfriend would never do that. I'd find myself making excuses for him, explaining away every behavior she pointed out. But her words would stick in my head like tiny seeds of doubt. She was so specific, so passionate in her concerns that part of me wondered if she was seeing something I was missing. You deserve someone who worships the ground you walk on, she'd tell me. Someone who treats you like the queen you are. Marcus is just ordinary. What I didn't know was that during our dinner parties, when I'd excuse myself to refill drinks or check on the food in the kitchen, the entire dynamic between them would shift. The hostility would melt away, replaced by something completely different. They'd lean closer together. Their voices would drop to whispers, and suddenly they weren't enemies anymore. I discovered this months later when my neighbor mentioned seeing them talking intimately on my balcony during one of our dinners while I was inside washing dishes. At the time when she told me, I actually felt happy about it. See, they were probably bonding, I had said excitedly. I knew if they just spent more time together, they'd realize they have things in common. Looking back, I want to shake that naive version of myself. The signs were everywhere. But I was so determined to create harmony that I ignored every red flag. When Zoe started asking specific questions about Marcus' schedule, I thought she was trying to be a better friend by taking interest in my relationship. When does he usually go to the gym? She'd ask casually. What time does he get home from work? Does he ever go to that coffee shop on 5th Street? I'd answer everything eagerly, thinking I was helping her understand his routine, so she could see what a stable, reliable guy he was. I even gave her details about his favorite restaurants, his weekend habits, and the places he liked to hang out with his friends. I was basically giving her a road map to my boyfriend's life, and I was too blind to see it. The signs started becoming impossible to ignore about 2 months into our regular dinner routine. But I was so invested in my fantasy of perfect harmony that I explained away every single one. Zoe began mentioning things about Marcus that she shouldn't have known. During one of her usual criticism sessions, she said, "And did you notice he has that tiny scar above his left eyebrow? It makes him look kind of rough, like he's been in fights." I paused, confused. How do you even know about that scar? You'd have to be sitting pretty close to him to notice something that small. I'm observant, she said quickly. I notice everything about people I don't trust. Another time she mentioned that Marcus probably spent too much money on expensive coffee. I bet he's one of those guys who goes to that fancy place downtown and orders complicated drinks, she said with disgust. The thing is, Marcus did have a complicated coffee order and he did go to an expensive place downtown, but I had never mentioned that to anyone. It was one of those little details you only know about someone when you spend real time with them. When I pointed this out, Zoe laughed it off. Riley, it's obvious just by looking at him. He has that whole pretentious coffee snob vibe. But the weirdest part was how Marcus started defending her. After months of tension, he suddenly began making excuses for her behavior. Maybe Zoe has a point about some things, he said one night after a particularly brutal dinner where she had criticized everything from his shirt to his opinions about movies. She's looking out for you. I can respect that. I was shocked. Are you serious? She was horrible to you tonight. She's passionate, he said with a shrug. I kind of admire how much she cares about your happiness. This was the same man who used to complain about her attitude, who would text me frustrated messages after our group dinners. Now he was defending her. I should have realized something was very wrong, but instead I felt relieved. Finally, they were starting to understand each other. The most obvious sign came during a dinner at my apartment when I stepped outside to take an important work call. The conversation was urgent and lasted about 15 minutes. When I came back inside, both Zoe and Marcus seemed flustered. Zoe's hair looked slightly messed up, and Marcus was adjusting his shirt. Everything okay? I asked, noticing the weird energy in the room. Fine, they said almost simultaneously, not making eye contact with me or each other. We were just talking about that new restaurant downtown, Zoe added quickly. Marcus was telling me about their menu, but neither of them had ever shown interest in discussing restaurants together before. They usually couldn't agree on anything, let alone have a calm conversation about food. I started paying closer attention after that, and I noticed more strange moments. How they would stop talking abruptly when I entered a room. How Zoe would know details about Marcus' work projects that I hadn't shared with her. How Marcus would bring up topics that only Zoe and I had discussed privately. The final piece of evidence came when I found a receipt in Marcus' jacket pocket for a restaurant we had never been to together. When I asked him about it, he said he had gone there for a work lunch. But later that same day, Zoe mentioned that she had tried that exact restaurant recently and hated it. Two people who supposedly couldn't stand each other had somehow both ended up at the same obscure restaurant within days of each other. The coincidence felt impossible. By spring, I was feeling like our relationship needed a fresh start. The constant tension between Marcus and Zoe during our dinners was exhausting me, and I thought maybe a change of scenery would help everyone relax and finally connect properly. "What do you think about taking a trip?" I asked Marcus one Sunday morning while we were having coffee in bed. "Somewhere we can just unwind and enjoy each other's company without all the distractions of home." His eyes lit up immediately. "That sounds perfect. Where were you thinking?" I had been researching beach destinations for weeks, dreaming of romantic walks on the sand and quiet dinners watching sunsets. "Maybe that coastal town you mentioned wanting to visit, the one with the lighthouse and the seafood restaurants." "Oceanside Bay," he said, looking surprised. "How did you remember that?" "I think I only mentioned it once." Before I could answer, my phone rang. It was Zoe, and when I told her about our trip plans, her response caught me completely off guard. "Oh my God, that sounds amazing. I actually really need a vacation right now. Work has been absolutely killing me," she said, and I could hear genuine excitement in her voice for the first time in months. I hesitated. The whole point was to get some alone time with Marcus, away from the constant drama of our group dynamics. But then I thought about how stressed she had seemed lately and how maybe this could be the breakthrough moment I'd been hoping for. "Would you want to come with us?" I heard myself asking, immediately regretting it, but unable to take it back. "Really? You wouldn't mind? I know it's your romantic getaway." "No, it could be fun." I lied, already imagining the arguments and tension that would follow us to the beach. "Maybe we could rent one of those big beach houses with separate bedrooms." When I told Marcus about Zoe joining us, I expected him to be disappointed or frustrated. Instead, he just nodded and said, "Sure, if that's what you want. It might actually be nice to have someone else to hang out with." That response should have sent alarm bells ringing in my head, but I was too focused on my fantasy of finally achieving peace between them. Zoe threw herself into the trip planning with an enthusiasm I hadn't seen from her in years. She researched restaurants, found the perfect beach house rental, and even suggested activities that she claimed Marcus would enjoy. "There's this great hiking trail that leads to a hidden cove," she told me, showing me photos on her phone. "Marcus mentioned loving photography, right? This would be perfect for him." I don't remember ever telling her that Marcus was into photography, but I pushed the thought aside. Maybe he had mentioned it during one of our dinners. She also seemed to know exactly which restaurants he would prefer, which beaches had the best surfing conditions, and even which local breweries served the kind of craft beer he liked. Her knowledge was suspiciously detailed for someone who supposedly couldn't stand him. "How do you know all this stuff about what Marcus likes?" I asked her while we were booking activities online. "I pay attention," she said with a shrug. "Know your enemy, right?" But she didn't say it with her usual bitter tone. There was something playful, almost affectionate in her voice that I had never heard before when she talked about him. The week before we left, I noticed both of them acting strangely excited about the trip. Marcus started working out more frequently, saying he wanted to look good in his swim trunks. Zoe went shopping for new bikinis and spent more money on vacation clothes than I had ever seen her spend on anything. "I want to look amazing on this trip," she told me while trying on a particularly revealing swimsuit. "Sometimes a girl just needs to feel sexy, you know?" I should have wondered why she cared about looking sexy on a trip where the only people who would see her were me and a boyfriend she claimed to hate. But instead, I was just happy that everyone seemed genuinely excited about our vacation together. The beach house was perfect, exactly what I had dreamed of for a romantic getaway. 3 bedrooms, a wraparound deck overlooking the ocean, and a kitchen that opened onto a living area with floor-to-ceiling windows. For the first 2 days, everything seemed to be going exactly as I had hoped. Marcus and Zoe weren't fighting. In fact, they were getting along better than they ever had at home. They laughed at each other's jokes, agreed on restaurant choices, and even collaborated on making breakfast without a single argument. I felt vindicated. This trip was exactly what we all needed. On our 3rd day, I decided to surprise Marcus with a gift from one of the local art galleries we had passed. He had admired a photograph of the lighthouse, and I wanted to buy it for him as a memento of our first vacation together. "I'm going to run into town for a little while," I announced after lunch. "There's something I want to pick up." "Want company?" Zoe offered, but she was lying on the deck in her new bikini, looking perfectly content to stay exactly where she was. "No, enjoy the sun. I'll be back in an hour or so." Marcus was reading in the living room and barely looked up when I kissed him goodbye. "Take your time," he said. "I might take a nap." The drive into town was beautiful, winding along the coastline with the ocean sparkling in the afternoon sun. I felt happier and more relaxed than I had in months. Finally, the 3 most important people in my life were getting along. I spent longer in town than planned, browsing through several galleries before finding the perfect piece. The lighthouse photograph was even more beautiful than I remembered, and the gallery owner told me stories about the local history that I couldn't wait to share with Marcus. When I got back to the house, I was practically bouncing with excitement. The surprise was going to be perfect. I parked quietly and decided to sneak in through the back door to surprise him. That's when I heard them. The sounds were coming from the deck. Soft moaning, whispered words I couldn't quite make out. And then Zoe's voice sang Marcus' name in a way that made my blood run cold. I crept closer to the sliding glass door, staying hidden behind the outdoor shower wall, and looked out onto the deck where we had been having breakfast just hours earlier. Marcus was lying on the lounge chair where Zoe had been sunbathing when I left. She was straddling him, her bikini top discarded on the deck beside them, and they were kissing with a passion and familiarity that told me this was definitely not their first time. But what destroyed me wasn't just seeing them together. It was watching how they moved with each other, how she whispered something in his ear that made him laugh softly, how he ran his hands through her hair like he had done with me countless times. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a drunken mistake. This was a relationship. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, documenting every detail in my mind. The way she called him baby, how he told her she was beautiful, the careful way they listened for any sound of me returning. They had been planning this. The whole trip, maybe even longer, had been an elaborate setup. And I had been the one to create every opportunity for them, begging Zoe to join us, leaving them alone together, practically pushing them into each other's arms. When I finally managed to move, I walked silently back to my car and sat there shaking. But instead of the devastation I should have felt, instead of tears or heartbreak, something else was taking over. Cold, calculating rage. I wasn't going to be the pathetic girlfriend who caught her boyfriend cheating and fell apart. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of destroying me. If they wanted to play games, if they thought they could use my trust and kindness against me, then they were about to learn that they had severely underestimated who they were dealing with. I started the car and drove around town for another hour, giving them time to clean up their mess and pretend nothing had happened. When I finally returned to the house, they were both in the living room, fully dressed and sitting on opposite sides of the couch like nothing had changed. "How was town?" Marcus asked with a smile that now looked completely fake. "Perfect," I said, matching his tone exactly. "I found the most amazing gift." The rest of that afternoon was like a masterclass in deception, and I was taking careful notes on every lie. When I gave Marcus the lighthouse photograph, he hugged me and said it was the most thoughtful gift anyone had ever given him. Zoe chimed in about how sweet and caring I was and how Marcus was so lucky to have me. I smiled and played along, but inside I was cataloging everything. The slight sunburn on Zoe's chest that hadn't been there when I left, the way Marcus' hair was messy in the back, like someone had been running their fingers through it. How they both seemed more relaxed and satisfied than they had any right to be. That night at dinner, I started my collection of evidence. While they told me about their relaxing afternoon, I secretly recorded the conversation on my phone, capturing every lie they told about napping separately and reading quietly. Zoe was on the deck the whole time, Marcus said, cutting into his fish. I barely saw her until you got back. I was so peaceful, Zoe added. Just me and my book in the ocean breeze. I nodded and smiled. That sounds perfect. I'm so glad you both got to unwind. But I was already planning my next move. Over the following days, I became a detective in my own relationship. I started taking pictures of everything. Their body language when they thought I wasn't looking, the way they would glance at each other during conversations, how they always seemed to know where the other person was. When we went to the beach, I offered to take pictures of just the two of them for my social media. Come on, you guys finally look like friends, I said cheerfully. Let me get a shot of you both by the water. They hesitated, but couldn't refuse without seeming suspicious. I took dozens of photos, capturing the way they stood just a little too close, how their hands almost touched, the intimate looks they shared when they thought I was focused on my camera settings. I also started paying attention to their stories. When Marcus said he was going for a morning run, I would casually ask Zoe what her plans were. Inevitably, she would mention needing to take a walk or get some fresh air around the same time. They thought they were being clever with their scheduling, but they were actually creating a perfect timeline of their deception. On our last night, I suggested we all go out for drinks to celebrate our amazing vacation. At the beachside bar, I bought round after round, encouraging them both to drink more than usual. Alcohol makes people careless, and I was counting on that. Sure enough, as the night went on, they became more comfortable with each other. Zoe laughed too loudly at Marcus' jokes. Marcus complimented her dress in a way that was definitely not appropriate. When Zoe went to the bathroom, Marcus watched her walk away with an expression that had nothing to do with friendship. I excused myself and followed her to the restroom, where I heard her on the phone with someone. I know it's complicated, but it feels so right, she was saying. I think I'm falling for him, and I'm pretty sure he feels the same way. When she came out of the stall and saw me, her face went white. Who are you talking to? I asked innocently. My sister, she said quickly. Just family drama. But I had recorded the entire conversation. Back home, I continued building my case. I started paying attention to their social media activity, screenshotting likes and comments that seemed too friendly. I noticed that they were often online at the same times, especially late at night when I was asleep. I also began testing them with small lies to see how they would react. I would tell Marcus that Zoe had said something she hadn't, or tell Zoe that Marcus had plans he didn't actually have. Their responses told me everything I needed to know about how much communication was happening behind my back. The most damning evidence came when I found a receipt in Marcus' jacket for a hotel room in our hometown on a day when he claimed to be working late and Zoe said she was visiting her family. The dates matched perfectly. By the time I was ready to make my move, I had photos, recordings, receipts, screenshots, and a detailed timeline of their betrayal. I had enough evidence to destroy them both, and I was just getting started. Planning my revenge took 3 weeks of careful preparation, and every detail had to be perfect. I decided that a public humiliation would be the most fitting punishment for two people who had been publicly lying to everyone who cared about them. My birthday was coming up in a month, which gave me the perfect cover story. I started talking excitedly about wanting to have a big celebration for the first time in years. I want to invite everyone, I told Marcus over dinner. All our friends, both families, people from work. I feel like turning 26 should be special. Marcus seemed genuinely happy about the idea. That sounds amazing, babe. You deserve a party. When I mentioned it to Zoe, she was equally enthusiastic. I'll help you plan everything. We can make it the party of the year. The irony of them helping me plan their own destruction was almost too perfect. I rented the community center downtown, the same place where Zoe's parents had held her graduation party and where Marcus' company had their annual holiday celebrations. Everyone would feel comfortable and familiar there, which would make the reveal even more shocking. I told everyone it was going to be a surprise party for me. I asked Marcus to bring me to the venue at 7, claiming I thought we were just going for a quiet dinner. I told all the guests to arrive by 6:30 to surprise me when I walked in. But the real surprise was going to be mine to give. I spent weeks creating a digital presentation disguised as a birthday slideshow. A celebration of friendship and love. I called it when I asked people to send me their favorite photos of us together. The first half was genuinely sweet. Pictures of Marcus and me on dates, photos of Zoe and me from college, group shots from parties and vacations. But then came the second half. I had organized all my evidence chronologically, starting with screenshots of their social media interactions that were too flirty for enemies, moving through photos from our beach trip where they stood too close, and ending with the recordings of their lies, the hotel receipt, and finally, a crystal-clear photo I had taken of them kissing in Marcus' car outside my apartment building the week before. The final slide was a simple message. Some people mistake kindness for stupidity. Tonight, you learn the difference. I also prepared a speech. I practiced it dozens of times until I could deliver it calmly and confidently without a hint of the rage that was burning inside me. The night of the party, I dressed in the most beautiful dress I owned. A red number that made me look confident and powerful. I wanted everyone to remember how stunning I looked when I destroyed 2 people's lives. Marcus picked me up exactly on time, complimenting my dress and telling me how excited he was about our intimate dinner. In the car, I almost felt sorry for him. He had no idea what was waiting for him. When we walked into the community center and everyone yelled, "Surprise!" his shock seemed genuine. For a moment, I wondered if I should call the whole thing off. But then I saw Zoe across the room wearing a dress I had never seen before, looking beautiful and guilty, and completely unaware that her world was about to end. I hugged everyone, accepted birthday wishes, and played the role of surprised and delighted birthday girl for exactly 30 minutes. Then I asked everyone to gather around for the special presentation. I wanted to share some memories with all the people I love most. I announced, my voice carrying clearly across the room. This past year has taught me so much about friendship, loyalty, and the importance of surrounding yourself with people who truly care about you. Marcus and Zoe were standing together near the front, both smiling at me with such fake warmth that I almost laughed. I started the slideshow, and for the first 10 minutes, everyone oohed and awed over the sweet photos and heartfelt memories. Marcus squeezed my hand. Zoe wiped away what looked like a genuine tear. Then slide 15 appeared on the screen. A screenshot of Marcus liking Zoe's Instagram photo at 2:47 a.m. with the comment, "Beautiful as always." I heard someone in the crowd whisper, "Wait, what?" The room went completely silent as slide after slide revealed the truth. I watched Marcus' face turn white, then red, then a sickly pale green. Zoe kept shaking her head like she could make the images disappear through sheer denial. When the audio recording started playing, Zoe's voice clearly saying, "I think I'm falling for him," her mother gasped audibly from the back of the room. Marcus' boss, who I had specifically invited, looked between him and the screen with obvious disgust. But the moment that made everything worth it was when the final photo appeared. Marcus and Zoe in a passionate embrace outside my apartment building, taken just 5 days earlier. Zoe's father stood up so quickly he knocked over his chair. "Riley," Marcus started, his voice cracking. "I can explain." "No need," I said calmly into the microphone. "I think the evidence speaks for itself." The room erupted in chaos. People were talking over each other, some demanding explanations, others expressing shock and outrage. I heard Zoe's mother saying something about raising her better than this and Marcus' sister calling him disgusting. Zoe tried to approach me, tears streaming down her face. "Riley, please let me explain. It's not what it looks like. It looks like my best friend and my boyfriend have been lying to my face for months while conducting an affair behind my back," I said, still speaking into the microphone so everyone could hear. "Is that not what it is?" She opened and closed her mouth like a fish, unable to form words. Marcus tried a different approach. "Everyone, please. This is between Riley and us. We don't need to do this publicly." "You mean the way you conducted your relationship publicly while lying to everyone?" I asked. "The way you let me plan this party, invite all these people while you were sneaking around with my best friend?" "No, Marcus. You chose to make this public the moment you decided to betray every person in this room who cares about me. I clicked to my final slide, my prepared statement, which I read aloud with perfect composure. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight to celebrate not just my birthday, but the end of my naivety. For months, I watched two people I trusted completely lie to my face, manipulate my feelings, and use my kindness as a weapon against me. I invited them into my life, my home, and my relationship because I believed in the goodness of people. Tonight, we all learned that some people don't deserve that trust. The aftermath was swift and devastating. Marcus tried to follow me outside, but my brother, Jake, physically blocked his path. You need to leave, Jake told him. Zoe's family left immediately, her father refusing to even look at her. Several mutual friends approached me to apologize and expressed their disgust at what they had witnessed. Marcus' boss shook his head and walked out without saying goodbye to him. Within 2 hours, videos of the slideshow were circulating on social media. By the next morning, everyone in our social circle knew exactly what had happened. The photos I had shown were being shared and discussed everywhere. Marcus lost 3 major clients that week when word spread about his character. His company, which prided itself on family values, transferred him to their smallest branch office in a different state. Zoe was asked to leave her book club. Her yoga studio became uncomfortable for her, and several mutual friends blocked her on all social media. But the best part was watching them try to make their relationship work under the weight of their guilt and the public shame. Within a month, they were fighting constantly. Marcus blamed Zoe for seducing him, while she accused him of using her to cheat. The foundation of lies that had brought them together couldn't support an actual relationship. They lasted exactly 6 weeks after my party before Marcus moved away, and Zoe was left alone with her reputation destroyed, and no one left to blame but herself. I, on the other hand, had never felt more powerful or free in my entire life. The weeks following my party were like emerging from a fog I hadn't even realized I was living in. Suddenly, people were reaching out to me with stories I had never heard before. I never liked Zoe. My coworker, Amanda, told me over coffee. She always seemed fake when you brought her to office parties. The way she would compliment your outfit and then roll her eyes when you weren't looking. My college roommate called me from across the country. Remember when Zoe accidentally told the guy you liked that you were dating someone else? I always suspected she did it on purpose. Even my neighbor, Mrs. Chun, stopped me in the hallway to share her observations. I saw that girl leaving your boyfriend's car several times when you weren't home, she said. I thought about telling you, but I didn't want to cause trouble if I was wrong. Everyone had seen signs that I had missed or ignored. But instead of feeling embarrassed about my blindness, I felt validated. I wasn't crazy or paranoid. I had been systematically manipulated by 2 people who were experts at deception. The support was overwhelming. Friends I hadn't talked to in years reached out to tell me how proud they were of how I handled the situation. My family was initially shocked by the public nature of my revenge, but my mom eventually admitted it was brilliantly executed. I raised you to be kind, she said, but I also raised you to be strong. Sometimes you have to show people that kindness isn't weakness. More importantly, I started recognizing patterns I had never noticed before. How Zoe always had to be the center of attention, even at events that weren't about her. How she would subtly undermine my confidence by making backhanded compliments. How she collected information about everyone's relationships and used it as social currency. I realized that Marcus had probably been chosen specifically because Zoe knew how much he meant to me. It wasn't about love or attraction. It was about power and the thrill of taking something that belonged to someone else. With this new clarity, I began rebuilding my life with intention. I enrolled in a photography class, something I had always wanted to try but never made time for. I started going to the gym not to look better for anyone else, but because I enjoyed feeling strong. I also became much more selective about who I let into my inner circle. When new people tried to befriend me, I paid attention to how they talked about others, whether they respected boundaries, and if their actions matched their words. The most surprising change was how attractive confidence made me to other people. Men approached me more often, but more importantly, the quality of people I attracted improved dramatically. I was no longer drawing in users and manipulators because I was no longer broadcasting vulnerability and naive trust. 3 months after the party, I met David at my photography class. He was quiet, genuine, and had no idea about my recent drama until I chose to tell him weeks later. When I finally shared the story, his response was perfect. Good for you. People like that count on their victims staying silent. I never heard from Marcus again after he moved away. But Zoe tried several times to reconnect. She sent long emails apologizing and explaining how confused she had been. She claimed she had been going through a difficult time and made terrible choices. She even suggested we could work through it and rebuild our friendship. I deleted every message without responding. She had shown me exactly who she was, and I believed her the first time. 6 months after my birthday party, I barely recognized the person I had become, and I loved every inch of her. The naive girl who used to bend over backward trying to make everyone happy was gone, replaced by someone who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to protect it. I had thrown myself into every aspect of self-improvement with the same strategic thinking I had used for my revenge. I joined a professional development group at work and started speaking up in meetings instead of staying quietly in the background. My boss noticed immediately and offered me a promotion that came with a significant salary increase. With my new income, I moved out of the apartment where so many betrayals had taken place and found a beautiful one-bedroom downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city skyline. Decorating it became an act of self-love. Every piece was chosen because I loved it, not because it might impress someone else. My relationship with David was growing stronger every day, built on a foundation of honesty that I had never experienced before. He knew about my past, respected my boundaries, and never made me feel like I needed to apologize for being cautious. When I told him I wanted to take things slowly, he said, "I'm not going anywhere. We have all the time in the world." But the most satisfying change was how I handled new people who tried to enter my life with questionable intentions. My experience with Zoe had given me a sixth sense for manipulation, and I wasn't afraid to use it. When a new coworker started asking suspiciously detailed questions about my relationship with David, I shut it down immediately. "That's pretty personal," I said with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I prefer to keep my private life private." When an old acquaintance from college reached out on social media claiming she wanted to reconnect, but immediately started fishing for information about my income and living situation, I politely declined her invitation to meet up. I had learned that protecting yourself isn't mean or paranoid. It's necessary and smart. The best part was discovering talents and interests I had never explored because I had been so focused on managing other people's emotions. Photography turned out to be a genuine passion, and my instructor encouraged me to enter a local competition. When I won second place, the confidence boost was incredible. I also started writing in a journal, documenting not just my daily life, but also my observations about people and relationships. The clarity that came from putting my thoughts on paper was addictive, and I began to understand myself in ways I never had before. My social circle had naturally evolved to include people who appreciated authenticity and directness. These new friends respected my boundaries, celebrated my successes without jealousy, and never made me feel like I needed to dim my light to make them comfortable. When David asked me to move in with him after 8 months of dating, I said yes without hesitation. But I also kept my apartment for another 6 months just to be sure. Trust, I had learned, should be earned slowly and proven consistently. The old me would have been embarrassed by my caution, worried about seeming paranoid or damaged. The new me understood that healthy skepticism was a form of self-respect. And anyone who had a problem with my boundaries wasn't someone I needed in my life anyway. 1 year after my party, I was having lunch with my sister when she casually mentioned running into Zoe at the grocery store. "She looked terrible," Emma said, picking at her salad. "Like she hadn't slept in weeks. She asked about you, actually." "What did you tell her?" I asked, genuinely curious but not concerned. "That you were doing amazing, which you are." Emma smiled. She got this look on her face like she was going to cry right there in the produce section. I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No pity. No anger. Just complete indifference. which was somehow more powerful than any emotion I could have felt. Later that week, I learned from mutual friends that Zoe and Marcus had indeed imploded exactly as I had predicted. Their relationship, built on lies and stolen moments, couldn't survive the reality of being together openly. Marcus had moved to Portland for work, and they had broken up via text message after a series of increasingly ugly fights. She kept accusing him of looking at other women, my friend Kate told me, and he told people she was clingy and paranoid. Apparently, once the excitement of sneaking around was gone, they realized they didn't actually like each other very much. Marcus, according to his former co-workers, was struggling professionally. Word of his character had followed him to his new job, and he was having trouble building trust with clients. His social media showed a series of failed attempts at dating with women who seemed to lose interest quickly. Zoe had it worse. She had stayed in town, but her reputation never recovered. The story of my birthday party had become legendary in our social circle, shared as a cautionary tale about karma and justice. She had tried to reinvent herself several times, joining new gyms, changing her hair, even attempting to start fresh in different social groups. But the internet is forever and people talked. I heard she had been seeing a therapist, which I actually hoped was true. Not because I felt sorry for her, but because I believed everyone deserved the chance to become a better person, even if it was too late to undo the damage they had caused. The most satisfying update came from an unexpected source. Marcus' sister, who I had always liked, reached out to me through social media. "I want you to know that our whole family was disgusted by what Marcus did," she wrote. "My parents stopped speaking to him for months, and he's been basically exiled from family gatherings. What you did at that party was brave, and I'm glad someone finally held him accountable for his actions." She also told me that Marcus had tried to reach out to me several times through mutual friends, claiming he wanted to apologize and make things right. She had told him to leave me alone. "Some things can't be fixed with an apology," she said. "He made his choices and now he has to live with the consequences. But the best part of my new life wasn't their downfall. It was my own rise. David and I had been living together for 6 months, and our relationship was everything I had never known I deserved. He was supportive without being controlling, loving without being possessive, and honest without being cruel. When I told him about my photography competition win, he surprised me with a professional camera and a weekend trip to the mountains to practice landscape photography. When I mentioned wanting to take a creative writing class, he helped me research programs and encouraged me to pursue it. "You light up when you talk about your passions," he told me. "I love seeing you excited about life." I had also started mentoring younger women at work, sharing what I had learned about recognizing manipulation and trusting their instincts. Several of them had thanked me for helping them navigate difficult situations with friends and romantic partners. My revenge had been perfect, but my recovery was even better. So, here we are 2 years later, and I need to tell you exactly how everyone in this story ended up because I think it matters. I think other women need to hear this. Marcus never recovered professionally or personally. He's still in Portland working for a small marketing firm that doesn't know his history, but he's never regained the confidence he once had. His dating life is a series of short-term relationships that end when women sense something off about him. He developed a reputation for being paranoid and jealous, constantly worried that he's being betrayed the way he betrayed others. Karma, it turns out, has a perfect sense of irony. Last I heard, he was in therapy for trust issues. The man who destroyed trust is now incapable of trusting anyone else. Zoe's story is more complex, but equally satisfying. She eventually left town, moving back in with her parents in another state. The social isolation broke her in ways I don't think she expected. She lost not just me and Marcus, but the entire social network she had spent years building. Her Instagram, once full of group photos and social events, became a sad collection of selfies and inspirational quotes about starting over. She tried to rebrand herself as a wellness influencer, posting about healing and growth, but everyone who knew her real story could see through the performance. She currently works at her father's insurance office and lives alone in a studio apartment. The last time someone mentioned her to me, they said she seemed smaller somehow, like she had lost something essential about herself. My family thrived. My parents, who had always worried I was too trusting, were proud of how I handled the situation. My brother, Jake, became fiercely protective and started paying closer attention to the people his own girlfriend brought around. My sister, Emma, used my story as a teaching moment with her teenage daughter about choosing friends wisely. David and I got engaged last month. When he proposed, he said something that showed me he truly understood who I had become. "I fell in love with your strength first, your kindness second. I know you can take care of yourself, which makes me want to take care of you even more. We're planning a small wedding with only people who have proven themselves trustworthy over time. But most importantly, I need to tell you about the woman I became. I'm not the same person who started this story, desperately trying to force harmony between people who were actively working against me. I'm someone who trusts her instincts, protects her energy, and refuses to be anyone's victim. I'm someone who understands that real friendship and love don't require you to diminish yourself or ignore red flags. Women, listen to me carefully. I was the girl who believed that being kind meant being naive, that trusting people completely was virtuous, that giving everyone the benefit of the doubt made me a good person. I learned the hard way that some people view kindness as weakness and trust as opportunity. They study our patterns, exploit our loyalty, and use our own love against us. The signs are always there. When someone consistently criticizes the people you love while positioning themselves as your protector, when they ask too many detailed questions about your relationships, when they know things they shouldn't know, trust that feeling. And if you discover you've been betrayed, don't just be a victim. Be strategic. Document everything. Plan carefully. Make sure the consequences match the crime. Not because revenge is always the answer, but because some people only learn when they face real accountability for their actions. The most important thing I learned is that protecting yourself isn't mean or suspicious. It's necessary. The right people will respect your boundaries and earn your trust slowly. The wrong people will complain that you're being difficult or paranoid. That's how you know the difference. I'm not sorry for what I did to Marcus and Zoe. They made calculated decisions to hurt me, and they faced calculated consequences. The only thing I regret is not trusting myself sooner, not seeing the signs that were right in front of me. But that girl who ignored red flags and made excuses for people who didn't deserve them, she served her purpose. She taught me exactly who I never want to be again. And sometimes that's the most valuable lesson of all. Now on to the next story. Story 2. When I returned home after graduating with honors from university, my life became a series of Sundays filled with uncomfortable silences and gazes that avoided meeting mine. My family, who once celebrated my small academic achievements, now seemed ashamed of me. It didn't matter that I had completed my studies with excellence. All they saw was that my path didn't fit into the mold of success they were so eager to display. Each dinner followed the same script. Dad, barely sitting down at the table, would fire the question that had become a ritual. "When are you going to get a real job?" He wouldn't even look me in the eyes when saying it. It was as if my mere presence in the house was an uncomfortable reminder of a failure that to them was as evident as it was shameful. "Your cousin was just promoted to junior partner at his law firm," Dad would say with pride. "Your sister is dating a finance guy, and you're still playing at building your business." He said it with that mocking tone he reserved for childish things, as if I were a child trapped in an office game. I clearly remember the day I got my first real contract. $500 for redesigning a local bakery's website. I ran down the stairs, my laptop in hand, my heart about to burst from my chest. "Dad, Mom, look," I announced with a smile that barely fit on my face. "I just signed with my first paying client." I slid the laptop across the table, hoping to see in their eyes the pride I had sought so many times. Dad barely glanced at the screen before changing the subject. "That's nice, honey. Did you know your cousin Mark just bought a new BMW? 28 years old and already driving a luxury car." He handed me back the laptop without even reading what I was showing him. Mom, on the other hand, didn't even pretend to be interested. She quickly changed the subject. "Jennifer, tell us more about Alex, that boy you're dating. Isn't his father running an investment firm?" I stood there with my laptop in my hands, watching my achievement evaporate before their eyes as if it had never existed. That night, I worked until 3 a.m. finishing the project while the house slept in a silence that was heavier than any word of contempt. Over time, I learned to separate my work life from my family life. I used my middle name professionally, as if I could protect something of myself that way. My company was growing, but at home I remained invisible. It wasn't humility that kept me quiet. It was pure exhaustion. Trying to prove your worth to those who have already decided you're worthless is like carrying a dead weight on your shoulders. It wears you down, drains you, consumes you. My sister Jennifer had started dating Alex 8 months ago. A young man in expensive suits with a perfect smile, the living stereotype of success. Alex is taking me to the beach next month, she would announce at every dinner, then giving me a look loaded with superiority. Maybe someday you too can take someone on vacation. Each of her words was a small stab. Each comparison, another cut in a wound I no longer knew how to close. I remember once during a family barbecue, I stepped aside for a moment to handle an emergency with a server. 10 minutes on the phone saved hours of work for my clients. But when I returned, my uncle greeted me with a mocking smile. Finished playing video games? Everyone laughed. No one asked what I was actually doing. No one wanted to know. Over time, they even started excluding me from important family gatherings, which Alex already frequented. The explanation was simple and cruel. "We don't want you to ruin the atmosphere," they said. My own family preferred to erase me to impress a stranger they barely knew. I still keep the message I received before my cousin's wedding. "We only have room for 4 at our table. Alex is coming with Jennifer. Maybe next time." I read it over and over, feeling a part of me breaking a little more. I had turned down a trip with a childhood friend that same weekend to accompany them. Instead, I spent the night alone, watching their happiness without me on Instagram. That night, something changed inside me. Something cold and sharp hardened. When Thanksgiving Day came, they couldn't uninvite me without raising suspicions. But they warned me. "Please don't talk about your little online thing," Mom told me over the phone, her voice full of nervousness. "Alex will bring his parents. They're very successful people." Mom didn't know that my little online thing already employed more than 40 people. She didn't know we had just closed an important investment round. She didn't know that I, the uncomfortable son, had built something they never bothered to ask about. That morning, I closed the last-minute flights tab I had opened on my laptop and decided to attend. Not for them, for me. What they didn't know was that the real Thanksgiving surprise was already sitting at their own table. Thanksgiving Day dawned cold under a gray sky that seemed to foretell what was to come. I put on the best clothes I had. A simple well-ironed shirt, dress pants I rarely wore, and polished shoes that had seen better days. I looked at myself in the mirror before leaving, not to adjust my appearance, but to remind myself who I was. I wasn't the failure they saw. I wasn't the uncomfortable relative they preferred to hide. I was a man who had built something real with his own hands, even if they didn't know it yet. The journey to the family house felt endless. Each traffic light, each corner was an opportunity to turn around and abandon everything. But I didn't. Every memory of contempt, of invisibility, of minimization burned within me, fueling a spark of dignity that refused to go out. When I arrived, the luxury cars were already parked in front of the house. My cousin's brand new BMW, an uncle's shiny Mercedes, and now Alex's gleaming Audi. Each of those cars was a silent reminder of what my family considered success. I entered the house and as always felt the fleeting glances, the forced greetings, the tense smiles that didn't reach the eyes. Mom greeted me at the door with a tight smile. Her eyes quickly scanned me, looking for flaws, looking for something to be ashamed of. "Good that you came," she said, but her tone was more of a warning than a welcome. I hung my coat in silence, swallowing the urge to say something. The aroma of roast turkey filled the house, mixing with expensive perfumes and contained anxiety. The room was meticulously decorated, golden centerpieces, scented candles, elaborately folded napkins, everything arranged to impress Alex's parents. And there he was, standing next to Jennifer, laughing as if he had belonged to our family forever. Tall, tanned, impeccably dressed. He looked like he was taken from a magazine cover. Jennifer looked dazzling beside him, wrapped in an elegant dress, the perfect symbol of the ideal daughter, the fulfilled promise. When they saw me, Alex raised a hand in a casual greeting, nothing to betray what was about to happen. I responded with a slight nod, preferring to stay on the sidelines, invisible as they preferred. Dinner began as expected. Toasts to the family, to new achievements, to the blessings of the year. Each word was a needle that stuck under my skin. When Dad made an especially long toast about the importance of building successful careers that made parents proud, I saw how he deliberately avoided looking at me. Jennifer took the opportunity to talk about Alex, his travels, their wedding plans, the family investments. Everyone listened, captivated, as if her voice confirmed everything they wanted to believe. I ate in silence, counting the minutes for it all to end until fate decided to intervene. At some point, Alex got up to go to the kitchen to get more dessert plates. Moved more by the need to escape the atmosphere than by courtesy, I offered to help him. While we were looking in the drawers, Alex looked at me out of the corner of his eye and smiled in a conspiratorial way. "Hey boss," he said quietly. "How's the team?" For a second, I thought I had misheard. I froze with a plate half pulled out. "What?" I asked, feeling a knot forming in my stomach. Alex let out a light laugh, like someone revealing a funny secret. "The team, man. Aren't you going to introduce me properly?" He shrugged. "I've been using your company to manage my online images for almost 2 years. When I found out who you were, I thought it was funny. I understood you preferred to keep things separate. I respect that, but I always thought it was weird that your family wasn't proud of you." The world seemed to wobble beneath my feet. Alex was a client of my company, and not just any client. He was one of those who had driven our growth the most in the last year. I had never known because, like most of our users, his identity was protected by privacy protocols. We returned to the table. I carried a secret weighing in my pockets, a burden I didn't know how to carry. Alex, however, seemed determined to bring it to light. When dessert arrived, and the toasts resumed their course, it happened. Alex stood up, raised his glass, and with a smile said, "I propose a special toast." Everyone looked at him expectantly. "To the man who has made much of my success possible this year, not only on a personal level but professionally. A guy who deserves much more recognition than he has received tonight. A round of applause for my boss," he shouted, pointing directly at me. The entire room fell into a leaden silence. The silence that followed Alex's toast was thick, almost solid. I could feel every gaze fixed on me, as if I were suddenly a completely new figure before them. My parents' faces froze. Horror, disbelief, and something deeper, a barely disguised fear. Jennifer dropped her glass, spilling wine on the white tablecloth. My aunt coughed uncomfortably, and my cousin sat with a piece of turkey half chewed in his mouth. I remained still, hands on my lap, as if containing myself was the only way not to bring down the entire scene with a single blow. I didn't need to speak. I didn't need to justify myself. The truth, after years of imposed silences, revealed itself alone, luminous, impossible to ignore. Alex, completely ignoring the tension or perhaps enjoying it, continued cheerfully, "Yes, I've not only been using his services for years, I've also recommended his company to many of my colleagues. He's brilliant, visionary, a true leader, and you have the privilege of calling him family." An uncomfortable murmur ran around the table. Mom was the first to try to regain some control. She cleared her throat awkwardly and forced a smile. "Well, we didn't know you two knew each other so well." Alex let out a sincere laugh. "Know him? If it weren't for his company, I wouldn't have gotten the promotion you're celebrating today." He lowered his voice as if sharing a secret. "Some of my partners are also his clients. Believe me, ma'am, your son is someone very important." I saw how Mom paled. Dad, who always showed so much pride talking about others' achievements, now seemed not to know where to look. My uncles, previously so condescending, shifted uncomfortably in their seats, exchanging furtive glances, and Jennifer trembled with contained rage. Her hands twisted the napkin, her lips pressed together, struggling to maintain a smile that no longer convinced anyone. I didn't need to say anything. It wasn't necessary. Life itself was exposing everything they had wanted to ignore. Jennifer, unable to stay quiet, let out a fake laugh between her teeth. I suppose everyone has their little project in life. The phrase fell like a stone in a lake. Even the uncomfortable murmur died out. Alex arched an eyebrow, surprised, and slowly turned his head toward her. His smile became colder, sharper. Little project, he repeated, savoring each syllable. I don't know if I'd call a small project a company that, according to my colleagues, is closing $1 million contract with one of the largest firms in the country. The blow was dry, definitive. I could have laughed at that moment. I could have risen triumphantly, pounding the table with my fists raised high, but I didn't. It wasn't necessary. Each of Alex's words was a hammer tearing down, one by one, the rotten foundations of a facade that for years my family had protected with such care. The desserts were left abandoned on the table. No one had an appetite. Some excused themselves to go to the bathroom. Others pretended to check their phones with sudden interest. Mom murmured something about bringing coffee, her voice barely audible. Dad stared fixedly at the candle in the center of the table, as if hypnotized by the small wavering flame. Then Alex leaned toward me and whispered so softly that only I could hear him. You know, I've always wanted to work directly with you. Maybe we can talk about that soon. Took me a few seconds to take in what he was saying. Not only had I been publicly recognized, not only had I been vindicated in the eyes of those who had most belittled me, now moreover, an even greater opportunity was opening up before me, and all this in front of those who for years had seen nothing but a hindrance in my existence. I nodded with serenity, like someone accepting any offer. But inside me, my heart was beating with savage force. Sure, I replied, my voice so calm it seemed we were talking about the weather. I'm available after the weekend. And it was at that precise moment that I felt everything change. Power, that invisible force that for so long had been concentrated in their hands, was now sliding toward me. Not because I claimed it, not because I demanded it, simply because I had grown too much to continue being ignored. When dinner ended, I was one of the first to get up. I didn't wait for the fake hugs or forced goodbyes. I put on my coat, firmly shook Alex's hand, and went out into the cold night. The freezing air hit me in the face like an invigorating slap. It didn't hurt. On the contrary, I felt more alive than ever. I walked to my car, not the most luxurious on the street, but mine, a symbol of everything I had built my way. Imperfect but authentic. I sat at the wheel, started the engine, and before leaving, I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath, not for the humiliation I was leaving behind, but for the silent promise of the future I had begun to build. A future where I finally didn't need anyone's approval to feel enough. That night, as I drove back home, I understood something. The most powerful validation doesn't come from those who doubted you. It comes from yourself. From not having given up when everything seemed against you. From having continued building brick by brick even when no one was applauding. And deep in my soul, I knew that night was just the beginning. The days that followed that dinner were silent, uncomfortable. The entire family seemed to have signed an unspoken pact. Pretend nothing had happened, as if Alex's toast could be swept under a rug made of trivial conversations and forced smiles. But something fundamental had changed. I felt it in every brief call, in every text message full of polite but empty phrases, in every averted gaze during family encounters. I was invisible, but also not accepted. I was uncomfortable, a living reminder of everything they had not wanted to see. And to my surprise, it didn't hurt me. Not in the way it once hurt me. It was more like a slow release, like taking off a heavy coat after walking under the sun. I had regained something I didn't even know I had lost. My dignity. But I also understood something else. A deeper part of me, more wounded, was still wondering why it had to go this far for me to be seen. Was it not enough to have worked hard, to have dreamed big, to have persevered in silence? The following Monday, as I walked to my office, a sense of belonging enveloped me there. Among my team, Among those who had accompanied me on long nights and uncertain beginnings, I was already valued. They didn't need a grandiose toast to see it. They knew it in the way they greeted me, in their genuine respect, in their silent trust. While reviewing contracts and answering emails, my cell phone vibrated on the table. It was a message from Jennifer. "Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a few seconds. Part of me wanted to ignore it, move on, leave the past where it belonged, but another part, more curious and perhaps more compassionate, felt the need to know what she was seeking. I agreed to see her. We arranged to meet at a downtown cafe, neutral ground where emotions couldn't easily overflow. I arrived early and sat in a corner watching people pass by. I thought about how much my life had changed, how some wounds, despite everything, were still there, barely covered by a thin layer of success. Jennifer arrived late, as always, but something about her was different. She didn't come wrapped in her usual aura of perfection. No designer clothes, no flawless makeup, none of the arrogance that usually accompanied her. She seemed smaller, more real. She sat across from me, ordered a coffee, and for several minutes just played with the spoon, avoiding my gaze. Finally, she raised her head. "I wanted to apologize," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "for how we treated you." I didn't know what to respond immediately. The apology, though welcome, sounded rehearsed, more like a need to clean her own guilt than to acknowledge the real damage. I stared at her. "Do you really want to apologize? Or do you just want to feel better about yourself?" I asked calmly, without rancor, but with a new firmness. Jennifer opened her eyes wide, surprised by my tone. For the first time, I wasn't the younger brother seeking her approval. I was a man who knew who he was and what he was worth. "I guess both," she admitted, dropping her shoulders with a tired sigh. "I never thought that." She stopped, searching for words. "Never thought I would achieve anything," I completed without softening it. She lowered her head. There was no need for her to say it. Her silence was a confession. And then I saw something in her that I hadn't seen before: vulnerability. A glimpse of the girl who had also been molded by the blows of others' expectations. Jennifer wasn't just the golden daughter, the favorite. She was also a victim of that relentless family mold, the one that allowed no mistakes, that demanded brilliant successes that could be flaunted to others. "You were always brilliant," she whispered. "But Dad, Mom, everyone expected something else. A pompous title, a suit and tie job, something they could show off at family gatherings." I leaned back in my chair and let her words float in the air. It wasn't personal. It never had been entirely. It was fear, insecurity, a desperate need to validate themselves through us. I smiled slightly, not in mockery, but in understanding. "I didn't build my life to impress them," I said. "I built it because I believed in myself, even when no one else did." Jennifer nodded, and for a moment all the pride, all the rivalry, all the absurd competition evaporated. We were just two siblings, two survivors of the same invisible chains. We said goodbye with an awkward handshake, a small gesture, but full of meaning. It didn't solve everything. It didn't erase years of distance or wounds. But it was a beginning. That night, as I drove back home, I understood something even deeper. The real triumph isn't that they finally recognize you. It's being able to see those who hurt you for what they are: broken human beings trapped in their own limitations. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their conditional love. I had already won the most important battle: not betraying myself. And in the silence of my car, as the city blinked around me, I smiled because I knew my story was just beginning. Life has a curious way of settling scores. Not always when one wants or how one expects, but sooner or later it does. During the months that followed, that truth was revealed in small details. My company continued to grow solidly. It wasn't an explosive rise like those that make headlines. It was steady, silent, and real. Each new client, each expansion, each signed contract was a silent testimony to the years of effort that no one had wanted to see. Sometimes, in the midst of work, I would find myself thinking of them, of Mom, of Dad, of Jennifer, of how they looked at me before and how they looked at me now. Did they really regret having belittled me? Or did they just regret having lost control over my life? The difference was subtle, but it mattered. And although part of me wished all the resentment would disappear, another wiser part knew that there were wounds that might never fully heal. The relationship with my family became tense and superficial, without open fights, but also without real closeness. It was like attending a play where everyone knew their lines, but no one really believed in the story. Family gatherings, when they happened, were carefully measured. There were comments about the weather, empty questions about work, mechanical congratulations on achievements they neither understood nor tried to comprehend. Dad, who previously boasted proudly of other relatives' successes, now spoke of me in vague terms. He has his technology company, he would say, like someone mentioning something he doesn't fully understand. Mom had adopted another approach: active denial. Whenever someone mentioned my projects or achievements, she skillfully diverted the conversation to safer topics. Jennifer's vacations, some cousin's promotion, anything but talking about me. But it no longer hurt me. Far from it, it gave me an unexpected peace. I no longer needed their validation. I no longer sought their applause. My validation came from elsewhere. It came from clients who trusted me, from employees who built their future alongside me, from partners who bet on my ideas. And above all, it came from within, from knowing that I had endured, that I had persisted, that I had overcome. One spring afternoon, while reviewing contracts in the office, I received an unexpected call. It was Alex. His tone was relaxed as always, but there was an underlying urgency in his voice. "Do you have a moment?" he asked. "I want to propose something to you." We agreed to meet that same week at his office. When I arrived, he greeted me with a broad smile, a cup of coffee in hand. The atmosphere was elegant. Glass walls, minimalist furniture, discreetly expensive artwork, all designed to impress. But those things no longer impressed me. I had learned that real value isn't measured in luxurious offices or high-end cars. It's measured in principles, in character, in the ability to build something authentic. We sat face to face, and without preamble, Alex presented his proposal. "I want you to consider a strategic alliance," he said. "My firm is interested in investing in your company. Not to control it, not to change it, but to boost it." I remained silent, processing his words. It was a huge opportunity. Access to capital, contact networks, new markets. But it also meant opening doors, exposing oneself more. And I, after everything I had experienced, was cautious. "I appreciate the offer," I finally replied. "But before accepting, I need to know something." Alex raised an eyebrow, curious. "Why now?" His smile was honest, without a trace of mockery. "Because now I see what you've built," he said. "Because now I understand that it wasn't you who had to adapt to us. It was us who had to learn from you." His words touched something inside me. It wasn't an act of charity. It wasn't a handout. It was genuine respect. We spent hours discussing details, conditions, expectations, visions for the future. When I left that meeting, I carried a pre-agreement under my arm. A sense of achievement that didn't need applause to be valid. It was enough to know that once again, I had gotten there on my own merits. The following months were dizzying. The alliance with Alex allowed us to expand our operations to new cities. We hired more talent, launched new divisions. We positioned ourselves in sectors where before we were hardly known. Each small step was a silent victory over the ghosts of the past. And yet, I never forgot my roots. I never allowed success to blind me or make me arrogant. I remembered well the Sunday dinners, the averted glances, the hurtful words. Not to live trapped in resentment, but to never become what they had been to me. To always know what I was worth, even when no one else saw it. One autumn afternoon, as I was walking to my car after a meeting, I ran into Dad on the street. It was a casual, unexpected encounter. He saw me, hesitated for a second, and then approached. "I've heard good things about your company," he said, almost in a whisper. I looked at him for signs of sarcasm or condescension, but there were none. Just an awkward, uncomfortable honesty, like a man trying to mend something, but not knowing how. "Thanks," I replied simply, without rancor. There were no hugs, no tears, just two men silently acknowledging the long roads each had traveled. Sometimes, I thought as I walked away, forgiveness isn't given in words. It's given in continuing to walk, in continuing to build, in not allowing the past to define who you are. And I, now more than ever, knew exactly who I was. As I drove back home that afternoon, the city lights passed like blurry stains in front of the window, and I thought about all the versions of myself I had been. The promising son, the diligent student, the uncomfortable relative, the failed professional, the invisible entrepreneur. I realized something I had been feeling for a long time. I had always tried to fit into an image that wasn't mine, into an expectation that didn't belong to me. But now I knew with a new certainty that that image no longer defined who I was. That small recognition from Dad, though awkward and late, was like closing a chapter. Not because I needed his approval, but because I understood that I no longer had to carry the need to be accepted by those who only knew how to value trophies and not trajectories. I was more than that. I always had been. They simply never knew how to see it. The following days were busy and exciting. New contracts, new alliances, new challenges. But in the midst of that whirlwind, one day I received a call I didn't expect. It was Mom. She almost never called me without reason, except for birthdays or emergencies. "Do you have a moment to stop by the house?" she asked. "I'd like to talk to you." There was something in her voice, a different softness, as if she were walking on unexplored terrain. I agreed, not out of necessity, but out of curiosity. When I arrived, the house was quiet. Mom greeted me in the living room with 2 cups of coffee on the center table. It was the same room where years ago they had ignored me. But that day the atmosphere was different. Dense, vulnerable, real. We sat down. Mom nervously wrung her hands, struggling to find the words. "I wanted to apologize," she said without preamble. "Not just for what happened at Thanksgiving. For everything." I remained silent, not out of coldness, but because I didn't expect this openness. She took a deep breath and continued. "I thought we were doing the right thing, pressing you, pushing you to follow the path everyone expected. I thought it was love, that it was protection. But I was wrong." Her words were awkward, painfully sincere. They weren't rehearsed apologies to save appearances. They were real, and that made them harder to process. "We were ashamed of you," she confessed in a whisper, like someone admitting an unforgivable sin. "Not because you weren't successful, but because your success didn't fit into the story we wanted to tell the world." It hurt to hear that, even though I already knew it or had felt it in every averted glance, in every uncomfortable conversation. Mom lowered her voice even more. "Now I see that you were always the bravest of us all." For an instant, I felt I could cry. Not from sadness, not from joy, but from pure relief. All that weight I had carried for so long, believing the problem was me, dissolved in that moment. And I understood something. It wasn't my job to fix their broken expectations. It wasn't my responsibility to fill the mold they had designed. My job was to continue being me with all my imperfection, with all my light. "Thank you," I finally said. I didn't need more. I wasn't looking for more. We stayed talking a while longer, like two people rebuilding a long-fallen bridge. We didn't solve everything. We didn't heal all the wounds, but we laid the first stones on more honest ground. When I left the house, the sky was covered with clouds. But on the horizon, there was a strange glow, like a silent promise that although the storm had been long, the sun always finds a way to return. That night in my apartment, I looked at everything I had built. Not just a company, not just a success story. I had built an authentic, free life. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to dream forward. Not to prove anything, not to silence old voices, but simply because I deserved it. Because I always deserved it. And although I didn't know exactly what came next, I knew one thing with total certainty. I would face it standing with my head held high. Because now I knew an unshakable truth. Who you are doesn't depend on who recognizes you. It depends on who you decide to be when no one sees you. And finally, I saw myself clearly. The months that followed that conversation with Mom were a mixture of calm and rebirth. Life finally gave me space to build without looking back, without seeking approval, without begging for recognition. Each new project, each client who trusted us, each employee who grew within the company was a reminder that the path I had chosen was real, solid, authentic. Jennifer was also changing. I saw her day by day leaving behind the need to be perfect, understanding that true greatness comes from humility and honest work. Her transformation was slow, sometimes painful, but genuine. And seeing her advance in her own process taught me something new about patience, about empathy. My family, for their part, had begun to build bridges. Small gestures, invitations to lunch, brief messages asking about my well-being. They weren't trying to fill the void of past years, but rather to build something different, something based this time on respect. Not all broken ties healed, and I understood that was okay, too. There are wounds that, although they scar over, leave marks, and those marks tell stories that deserve to be respected. One ordinary Saturday, while organizing papers in my office, I found an old notebook I used in the beginning. The pages were full of clumsy ideas, impossible budgets, dreams too big for someone who at that moment felt so small. Among all those notes, one phrase stood out, underlined several times. Someday they'll know who I am. I stared at those words for a long time. The young man who wrote them did so from pain, from the desperate hunger to be seen. I didn't judge him. I knew everything he had gone through, but I also understood something very profound. I no longer needed anyone to know who I was to feel complete. I closed the notebook. I kept it in a drawer, not as a sad memory, but as a silent monument to the journey. Life isn't about being seen. It's about seeing yourself, about recognizing yourself when the world decides to ignore you, about continuing to believe even when no one else does, about building even when no one applauds, about dreaming even when no one believes, about persisting even when everything seems against you. That afternoon, I left the office without a fixed destination. I breathed the fresh air of the city. I felt life beating beneath my feet. There was no final destination. There was no goal I needed to reach to feel successful. The real victory was this: being able to look back without regrets, look at the present with gratitude, and look to the future with hope. Because in the end, that's what matters most. Now on to the next story. Story 3. I, 34 am Nolan. If you had told me a year ago that a bar stool would be the thing that shattered whatever thin illusion of family I had left, I probably would have laughed. I've never been the dramatic type, and I've always tried to keep things civil, especially when it came to my younger brother, Carter. But sometimes it's not one big betrayal that breaks you. It's 1,000 tiny cuts that finally hit an artery. And for me, it started with a dinner invitation that I never should have accepted. Growing up, Carter and I weren't particularly close, but we weren't enemies either. There was the usual sibling bickering. He broke my Game Boy. I accidentally deleted his save files. He told Mom I skipped school once, and I ratted him out for sneaking out. But nothing crazy, just normal kid stuff. The gap really started widening after college. I went to a state university, paid my own way with scholarships and part-time work, while Carter, the golden boy, got a full ride from Mom and Dad to a private school out east. No strings attached. Just, we believe in his potential. You'd think that might spark some resentment in me, and maybe it did quietly, but I never said anything. What was the point? After graduation, I built my own IT consulting business from scratch. It took years to get off the ground, and there were months I could barely pay rent. Meanwhile, Carter got a job right out of school at a flashy marketing firm through one of Dad's old golf buddies. Within 6 months, he was posting pictures on Instagram from ski resorts and rooftop brunches with captions like, "Work hard, play harder." Again, I didn't say anything. Let him have his fun. Our parents always had this way of brushing me aside while shining the spotlight on him. I was independent, they'd say. You never needed much from us. Carter, on the other hand, was sensitive, creative, the dreamer. So, when he needed money to cover rent one summer because he'd blown his paycheck on a weekend in Vegas, of course Mom wired it over without hesitation. When I asked for a small loan to help me cover my business taxes one year, I got a lecture about financial responsibility and learning from my mistakes. Still, I didn't fight it. I told myself it didn't matter, but it did. I kept the peace. Every family dinner, every birthday, every holiday, I showed up. I smiled. I asked Carter about work, even though he never asked about mine. I bought thoughtful gifts while he showed up empty-handed. I helped Dad move his tools to the new garage one summer, spent 4 hours sorting bolts and labeling shelves. Carter showed up after everything was done, took a few selfies with the toolbox, and posted them like he'd done the heavy lifting. When Carter announced he was getting married to a woman named Dana, a polished, Pinterest-perfect PR consultant with a laugh like wind chimes, I genuinely wanted to be happy for him. I even offered to help. I figured maybe, just maybe, this could be a fresh start, a chance to connect. So, when Carter called and asked if I'd be willing to cover the rehearsal dinner as my contribution, I didn't hesitate. Of course, I said, just send me the details. He told me it would be at this rustic Italian place in the city, one of Dana's favorites. I looked it up. $1,300 for a group dinner wasn't exactly pocket change, but my business had done well that quarter, and I figured it was worth it. It was family. It was Carter. I didn't hear much from him for weeks after I agreed to foot the bill. No updates, no thank you text. I assumed I'd get an invite with the time and place. Maybe a note of appreciation. Instead, 2 days before the event, I got a forwarded email with the subject line, "Rehearsal Dinner Final Headcount." No message from Carter, just a forwarded email from Dana's assistant. The guest list was long. Dana had invited what looked like half her firm. And I noticed something strange. My name was tucked in at the bottom under miscellaneous/extended family. I brushed it off. Maybe it was just a formatting thing. Then came the night of the dinner. I arrived early, dressed in a navy blazer and button-up. Not too formal, but presentable. The restaurant was stunning. Exposed brick walls, flickering candlelight, soft jazz humming in the background. The hostess smiled and led me to the private dining area in the back where a long table stretched across the room, elegantly set with name cards and centerpieces. And there, near the front, were my parents, Carter, Dana, and her family already seated, already laughing. It felt like walking into a scene I didn't quite belong in. I scanned the table for my name. Nothing. Then I saw Carter standing near the bar with a drink in hand. I walked over smiling and gave him a quick one-armed hug. "Hey man, place looks great." He looked me up and down, then nodded. "Yeah." Dana really wanted something classy. I nodded, waiting for some kind of acknowledgement. "Thanks for covering it. Glad you're here." Something. But instead, he just sipped his drink and motioned with his chin. "Your seat's over there." I turned and saw a bar stool near the wall, a small cocktail table with a single setting. No centerpiece, no name card, just isolation. I blinked. Is there a reason I'm not at the table?" Carter raised an eyebrow like I just asked if the sky was blue. "It's just, Dana's family is sitting with us. Real family. We had to make room for her uncles and the wedding planner's assistant." So he trailed off like that explained everything. Real family. That word echoed in my chest like a slap. I looked at my parents across the room. Neither of them looked up, not even a wave. I don't know how long I stood there, but eventually I sat at the bar stool. I watched as the toasts began. I watched as the waiter poured everyone else a round of champagne and skipped me entirely. I listened to Dana's father say something about how blessed we are to have everyone here, and I chewed my chicken piccata in silence. I didn't even know what to feel. Hurt, embarrassed, angry. Mostly, I just felt hollow. Then dessert came. Someone passed out slices of tiramisu and started clapping for the couple. The mood was buzzing. And just when I thought it was finally over, the waiter approached me with a smile and said, "Hi there. Are you the one handling the check for the group tonight?" I looked up, and that's when something in me shifted. I didn't say anything right away. The waiter stood there, pen poised over his little black pad. Smiling politely like this was just another normal moment in a normal dinner. I looked back toward the long table where my brother and his fiancée were laughing about something her cousin said. My parents were seated beside them, deep in conversation with Dana's aunt. No one looked my way. No one even glanced. And suddenly, the air around me felt different, colder, thinner, like I wasn't part of this room at all. I looked back at the waiter and gave a polite nod. "Yeah, I'll take care of it. He smiled again and walked off to get the bill. But something inside me was already shifting, a quiet sort of storm gathering in my chest. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Not in that moment. It was something deeper, heavier. I sat there listening to the faint clink of glasses, watching my own reflection shimmer in the polished marble bar. And in that moment, a question started forming in the back of my mind. Why do I keep showing up for people who never show up for me? I sat through the rest of that dinner like a ghost, silent, invisible. I picked at the tiramisu. I watched the speeches and claps. Carter stood up and gave some long-winded toast about love being an adventure and family being the anchor. I actually laughed out loud at that. Just once, a quiet snort into my glass. No one noticed, or if they did, they didn't care. The next morning, I woke up with a hollow chest and a splitting headache. Not from alcohol. I'd barely touched the wine. It was something else. A mental hangover. The kind you get after spending too much time around people who make you feel small. I paced around my apartment making coffee I didn't even want, scrolling through messages that weren't there. No thank you text. No check-in. No, hey, great seeing you last night. Nothing. Then that afternoon, I got a message from Dana. It wasn't a thank you either. It was a reminder to confirm the final payment for the rehearsal dinner. The tone was chipper and professional, like she was talking to a caterer. No mention of the bar stool. No mention of being shoved to the margins like a stranger at my own brother's event. I stared at her message for a full minute before typing out a response, then deleting it, then typing it again, then deleting it. Eventually, I just closed the app and went for a walk. I needed space, but space didn't help. Not really, because 2 days later, we had the wedding rehearsal itself and I had to show up. I was one of the groomsmen. Yeah. After all that, I still had a role to play. I know how that sounds. Spineless, pathetic even. But it's hard to walk away when you've spent your whole life convincing yourself that if you just try harder, if you just stay quiet and helpful and generous, maybe they'll finally see you. The rehearsal was held at the venue, a modern glass chapel overlooking a lake. It was beautiful. Crisp white chairs, floating candles in little glass bowls, rows of tulips arranged like a magazine cover. But none of it felt real to me. I kept thinking about that bar stool, about Carter not even flinching when he told me to sit over there, about the way my parents didn't blink. During the walkthrough, Dana handed out little gift bags to her bridesmaids. Custom robes, jewelry, monogram tumblers, the whole Pinterest package. Carter handed out matching cufflinks to the groomsmen. Except he didn't give me a set. He didn't even look my way. I was standing right there, second in line behind his best man, watching him hand out those velvet boxes like Oprah one by one. When he was done, he looked up and just went, "Oh, sorry man. I only ordered 5. Didn't know you were confirmed." Confirmed? Like I was a name on a spreadsheet. Like I wasn't the guy who literally paid for the dinner 2 nights ago. Like I wasn't his brother. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. What was I even supposed to say? Hey, remember me? The one who raised your goldfish when you went to camp? The one who bought you a used Xbox for your graduation because mom said she couldn't afford one and then magically bought you a car 3 weeks later? Yeah. No, that wasn't the moment. I stayed quiet again. After rehearsal, we gathered at Dana's parents' house for drinks and light snacks. It was supposed to be casual bonding. The house was massive. Gated driveway, indoor fountain, the works. Everyone mingled on the patio. I found a corner near the fire pit and stuck to my drink. I didn't know most of the guests, and the ones I did know didn't really seem to know me. Eventually, my dad wandered over with a half-full glass of scotch. He sat down in the chair beside me, sighing like he'd just finished mowing a lawn. "You all right?" he asked. I shrugged. "Sure." He looked around, then leaned in a bit. "I know things have been a little tense lately. Carter's got a lot on his plate. Dana's family is intense, but it's his big day. Just try to go with the flow." All right, go with the flow. That phrase rattled around in my skull like a loose screw. I'd been going with the flow for 3 decades. What did it get me? A bar stool, no cufflinks, and now a lecture about how hard it must be for Carter. I nodded. "Sure, Dad. I'm good." He gave my knee a quick pat like he was proud of me, then stood and walked off before I could say anything else. That night, I went home and sat in the dark. I didn't even turn on the lights. I just sat there thinking about my childhood, about how many birthdays I spent watching Carter blow out the bigger cake, about the time I scored second place in the state science fair, and Mom told me, "That's great, but Carter's art piece is going to be displayed at the district board meeting." About the way they always framed me as the one who didn't need praise. Maybe that was true once, but not anymore. The next morning was the wedding. I arrived earlier than everyone else. In fact, I brought my own cufflinks, plain silver ones I'd gotten years ago from an old client as a thank you gift. I sat in the dressing room and waited as the other groomsmen filed in, laughing and high-fiving and sipping from those little bottles of bourbon someone had brought. Carter walked in last. He looked sharp, black tux, hair slicked back, smiled like a toothpaste commercial. He barely looked at me, just clapped his best man on the back and started taking photos with the photographer. At one point, Dana came in, saw me sitting off to the side and said, "Oh, Nolan, could you help grab the extra chairs from the back? We need 6 more for the cocktail hour." I blinked. "I'm one of the groomsmen." She tilted her head like I just said I was the valet. "Yeah, but you're not in the early photos, so it's fine, please." Then she walked off before I could answer. I looked at Carter. He didn't say a word, didn't even shrug, just kept posing. That was the moment, the real one. Not the bar stool, not the cufflinks, not even the chairs. It was the way he didn't care. Not a flicker of concern on his face. Not even a twitch of discomfort. Like my humiliation was routine, expected, normal. I got up, walked to the back room, and grabbed those damn chairs one by one. And as I carried the last one out to the patio, sweat starting to stain the collar of my shirt, I caught a glimpse of my mother standing by the bar, chatting with Dana's mother. I heard her say, "Oh yes, Carter's always been the star of the family. Nolan's sweet, but he's more of a behind-the-scenes kind of guy." I froze just for a second. Then I set the chair down, walked back into the dressing room, and sat back down, my heart thudding like a war drum. Something inside me was burning now. Slow, steady. Not rage. Not yet. Something older, deeper. I checked my phone. Still no message from Carter. No. "Thanks for handling the dinner." No acknowledgement. And then 15 minutes before the ceremony was supposed to begin, the wedding coordinator walked into the room and handed Carter the final invoice for the rehearsal dinner. His eyes scanned it. Then they flicked up to me, and just like that, everything changed. He stared at the invoice like it was written in a foreign language. His eyebrows pinched together, his mouth opened just slightly, this faint little twitch like he might try to laugh it off, but nothing came out. He just looked over at me, holding the paper like a piece of evidence in a courtroom, and said loud enough for half the room to hear, "Hey, didn't you say you were covering this?" My mouth went dry. Every groomsman in that room went quiet, except for the best man, who let out an awkward chuckle and sipped his drink like he wanted to disappear into the wallpaper. The photographer kept snapping pictures, pretending not to notice. The stylist in the corner suddenly got very busy with her brush kit. And I sat there, cufflinks on, tie perfectly adjusted, staring up at my brother. There it was, the moment he turned what should have been a private conversation into a public performance. One final act of control before the vows. One last jab to remind everyone that I was the helpful one, the wallet, the assistant, not the brother, not the equal. I stood up slowly, walked toward him. My legs were steady, but my hands were cold. I reached for the invoice, took it gently from his hand, and glanced at the total. $3,472.19. Tax, gratuity, and a few last-minute upgrades, apparently. I folded the paper neatly in half, tucked it into my inside jacket pocket, looked him in the eye and said, "Good luck with that." Then I turned and walked out of the room. No yelling, no scene, just calm. Steady footsteps down a carpeted hallway, past the chapel entrance, past the guests beginning to trickle in, past the floral arch that cost more than a month of my rent. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until I stepped outside into the cold air and let it go all at once. My car was parked 3 blocks away. I walked the whole distance without looking back. I didn't even attend the wedding. No one stopped me. No one texted. No one called. I half expected someone. My mom, my dad, even Carter, to come storming out, demanding I come back, asking how I could do that on his big day. But silence followed me home. A thick, suffocating silence that trailed me all the way to my apartment and settled into my living room like smoke. And then it hit me. This was it. This was the moment I finally stopped trying. It felt awful and freeing. At first, I just sat there on my couch, staring at the same spot on the wall for what felt like hours. The ceremony was probably happening while I was still in my dress shoes, still buttoned up, like I hadn't left. I kept thinking, what now? What comes after the moment you burn the bridge you spent your whole life pretending was still worth crossing? The next day, I got the first text. It was from Dana. Hi, Nolan. Not sure what happened yesterday, but we really need you to take care of the dinner bill. It's your responsibility. Please don't put us in a tough spot. No. Are you okay? No acknowledgement that I walked out of my own brother's wedding. Just the bill. I didn't respond. A few hours later, a follow-up. Nolan, this is really unprofessional. Carter and I are extremely hurt. You promised you'd handle this. Then one from my mom. We need to talk. Carter is very upset. Why would you do this to him? To him. Not one message asking why I left. Not one word asking what happened. Just assumption and guilt, all wrapped in a tone of maternal disappointment I knew too well. I turned off my phone. The silence was better. I didn't go to the brunch the next morning. I didn't check social media. I didn't reach out to anyone in the family. I went back to work. I met with clients. I drank my coffee in peace. I cleaned my kitchen. Finally fixed the leaky faucet and threw out the cheap cufflink box I'd been keeping for no reason at all. For 3 weeks, I didn't hear from anyone. Not even once. And the crazy thing was, life got better. Not in some dramatic movie-like way, just less noise, less tension. I didn't realize how much of my brain had been occupied with trying to earn their approval until that space suddenly cleared up. It was like uninstalling software you didn't realize was running in the background. I started sleeping better. I started walking more, just around the block after dinner, sometimes with a podcast, sometimes just in silence. The air felt better. I started eating like a human again instead of living off coffee and deadlines. And slowly, something new started to bloom in that quiet space. Me. One morning, I looked around my apartment and realized I wanted more. Not more stuff, not more people, just more life. I'd spent so much time being a support beam for everyone else's success that I'd never really looked at what I could build for myself. So I started. I upgraded my website, invested in some new gear for the business, started reaching out to potential partners I'd always been too timid to contact. I took on 3 new clients in a month. I hired a freelance designer to rebrand my logo. And for the first time in years, I felt proud when I handed someone my business card. I didn't tell anyone in my family. They didn't ask, which honestly made it easier. Then one Friday night about a month and a half later, I was sitting at a wine bar with a client-turned-friend, just sipping a glass of something I couldn't pronounce. When she asked me, "You always talk about your work. What about your family?" And I paused. I didn't know what to say. It wasn't anger that stopped me. It was clarity. I didn't want to retell the old story. I didn't want to explain the bar stool or the invoice or the chairs, because those things weren't the point anymore. The point was I wasn't living under their rules anymore. I just shrugged and said, "It's complicated." She smiled. "Aren't they all?" We changed the subject. That night, I went home and checked my phone for the first time in days. There were a few unread messages from Carter. The last one, dated 2 weeks ago, read, "So, I guess we're just not talking now. Cool. Real mature, Nolan." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. But then 2 months after the wedding, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Then curiosity got the better of me and I listened. It was Dana. Her voice was tight, measured, but underneath the polite phrasing was tension, thinly veiled panic. "Hi, Nolan. I'm really sorry to bother you, but we're trying to sort out some financial issues with the venue, and the dinner invoice still hasn't been resolved. It's now in collections. We thought you had taken care of it. If there's been a miscommunication, can we please clear it up? I stared at the wall, phone still in my hand, and for the first time in a long time, I smiled. Not out of spite, not out of revenge, out of freedom. Because I wasn't their safety net anymore. I wasn't their backup plan. I wasn't their behind-the-scenes guy. I was just Nolan, and I was doing fine without them. But that's not where this ends. Because just when I thought they'd finally backed off, just when I thought I could quietly live my life and let them carry the weight of their own mess, they found a new way to drag me back in. Only this time they made one fatal mistake. They tried to use me again. And this time I was ready. It was early spring when the next message came. I remember it clearly because I was out of town for a long weekend. Nothing extravagant, just a quiet lakeside cabin rental about 2 hours north. It was the kind of trip I never used to let myself take. Always too busy trying to prove I was reliable, available, indispensable. But now I'd learned the value of peace, solitude, unapologetic rest. The notification buzzed through while I was sitting on the porch wrapped in a hoodie, sipping black coffee as birds trilled somewhere in the trees. I almost ignored it. I almost left it for later, but I didn't. And when I opened it, I saw a name I hadn't thought about in months. My mother. Hey Nolan, Carter mentioned you might be free this summer. Your cousin Taylor is getting married in July and the whole family's going. Would be great to have you there. We're renting a big house together. Can you pitch in for the deposit? I stared at the screen. Deposit? Pitch in like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't been exiled to a bar stool at my own brother's rehearsal dinner. Like I hadn't walked out of his wedding and been ghosted for weeks, only to receive a voicemail asking me to pay for the dinner they all pretended I never paid for in the first place. I didn't respond. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out an old black leather notebook from my bag, the kind I used to use in the early days of my business when I still scribbled down client notes by hand, and flipped to a clean page. I wrote 3 words at the top, what they owe, and then I began to list. Not just money, mom's broken promises, dad's silence, Carter's humiliation games, the manipulation, the gaslighting, the decades of being behind the scenes. But I didn't stop there. I made a second list titled What I've Built, and this list was longer. A thriving consulting business, a growing list of clients, my independence, my peace, my strength, my clarity, my self-worth, my control. That was the word that stuck with me. Control. Because for the first time in my life I had it, and they didn't even know it yet. That was the spark. The setup didn't come all at once. It came in layers, tiny, deliberate choices that lined up like dominoes. I didn't want some messy emotional outburst. That was Carter's territory. No, I wanted precision, timing, something that would shift the balance permanently. I started with information. Over the next few weeks, I combed through every email, invoice, and message related to the rehearsal dinner. I still had the forwarded event coordination email from Dana's assistant, the auto-confirmation from the restaurant booking software, and even a follow-up from the manager thanking me for confirming the final headcount and payment responsibility, all tied to my business account. Good. Then I contacted the restaurant directly. A friendly call, nothing aggressive. I explained I'd been listed as the payment contact but had walked out before finalizing the bill. The manager, Mark, remembered the night immediately. Said it was one of their biggest bookings that month. I remember your brother, he said. Was he the groom? Tall? Dark hair? Bit loud. Yeah, I replied. Right. Well, you never paid. So, the invoice got bounced to collections. That's standard after 60 days. Who's handling the collections? He gave me the name of the agency. I thanked him and hung up. Then I called the agency. A few polite questions and I found out that Carter had tried to dispute the charge, claiming it wasn't his responsibility. He'd given my name as the original financial contact, but without a signed agreement or credit card on file. The collection agency had hit a wall. It was currently stalled. That gave me time and leverage. The next piece came from a former colleague of mine, Devin, a quietly brilliant cybersecurity consultant I'd worked with years ago. We'd kept in touch, grabbing the occasional drink or sending memes back and forth. I messaged him one night, "Hey man, quick question. Know anything about reputation management firms? He sent back a thinking emoji. Depends. You looking to protect something or expose something? Both, I replied. That Friday we grabbed dinner. I explained everything, the bar stool, the bill, the voicemail, the new ask for a deposit. Devin listened, nodding slowly, stirring his drink without taking a sip. Classic narcissistic triangulation, he muttered. I just want them to stop acting like I owe them something, I said. But I want a moment, not a meltdown, just a moment that makes them see. Devin smirked. You want a long fuse, not a firecracker? Exactly. We started building something. While Devin pulled a few strings with a contact at a data indexing firm, nothing illegal, just public record scanning, I began gathering social media screenshots. Dana had been posting wedding photos for weeks. One in particular caught my eye, a wide shot of the rehearsal dinner table, the caption reading, "Couldn't have asked for a better night with our favorite people. 2 hearts, #real family." And there it was again, that phrase, real family. She had no idea how badly those 2 words burned through every bridge they had with me. But I was done being scorched. It was time to return the heat. I took a screenshot, archived the post, saved it to a cloud folder titled July. I didn't know exactly what the endgame looked like yet, but I knew when it would happen. At the cousin's wedding. Taylor and I had never been especially close, but he was one of the few people in the extended family who had never made me feel like a footnote. He was the kind of guy who shook your hand properly and remembered your dog's name. When I got the official invite to his wedding, I almost declined. Then I saw the venue, a massive historic estate with gardens, and a reception hall known for its glass atrium. The kind of place with valet parking, a jazz trio, and signature cocktails named after the bride and groom. But more importantly, it was exactly the kind of place my family would go all out for. I RSVP'd yes. Then I emailed the estate coordinator and asked a few quiet questions about seating arrangements. I framed it as a family member wanting to ensure elderly guests wouldn't be too far from exits. The coordinator, a woman named Trisha, was helpful and detail-oriented. I casually asked about the family house rental, too. Oh yes, she said. Your parents reserve the South Wing house. Sleeps 15, I believe. Full payment pending. I thanked her and I smiled, because now I had a window. See, over the years, my family had grown used to using my generosity as a fallback. It started small. Spotting someone for gas money, helping with Carter's books, buying Dad a new cordless drill after his broke. Then it grew, a few hundred for a surprise birthday cake for Mom, a few thousand for Carter's moving expenses. The rehearsal dinner always presented like an opportunity for me to show up. But this time, I wouldn't show up as the wallet. I'd show up as the mirror, the one they tried to avoid looking into for years. So I waited. June came and went. Then, 10 days before Taylor's wedding, I got a group email from my mom. Hi family. Just a quick reminder that we're finalizing the shared house rental for the wedding weekend. We're splitting the cost between all of us. Comes out to $860 each for the 4 nights. Please send your portion via bank transfer to me by Friday. Thank you. So excited to see everyone. I stared at it. $860. After everything. I didn't respond. 3 days later, another message. Hi, Nolan. I didn't see your transfer come through yet. Can you confirm you're still staying with us? We're trying to avoid paying extra at the last minute. Still staying with us? As if we were a we. As if there hadn't been a fracture so deep it cracked the foundation of our entire relationship. That was when I knew this wasn't just about money. It was about accountability. And they were going to learn what it felt like when the one person they thought would never hold them accountable suddenly did. It happened on a Saturday in July. Clear skies, soft breeze, not a cloud in sight. The kind of wedding day people dream about. I arrived early, not to help set up, not to carry chairs, not to be useful. I just wanted time to walk the grounds, take in the place, and center myself before it all went down. The estate was stunning. Winding paths through manicured gardens, fountains humming quietly. White linen draped across archways like silk clouds. A string quartet was warming up near the entrance to the glass atrium where the reception would take place. Guests were beginning to arrive in waves, dressed in navy suits and pastel dresses, all smiles and small talk. I wore a tailored charcoal gray suit and brought a guest, Jessica, a friend from work who understood the assignment. She knew the whole story, knew the names, knew exactly when to stay close and when to step aside. She'd even practiced the smile I told her to wear when Dana or my mother inevitably walked up with that passive-aggressive glint in their eyes. We were seated in the 4th row during the ceremony, close enough to be visible, far enough to stay unnoticed for now. Carter and Dana sat in the front, of course. Carter in his sunglasses, looking smug and perfectly curated for a family photo op. Mom and Dad flanked him. They hadn't seen me yet. Not really. And when they did, they offered only the faintest wave, as if I were a distant cousin, not a son, not a brother, just another name on the guest list. Typical. The ceremony passed without issue. Taylor and his bride exchanged vows, kissed, and walked off to applause. Everyone clapped. I did too. Quietly, genuinely. They deserved their day. But it wasn't over. The reception started with cocktail hour. Tiny hors d'oeuvres and custom drinks on the lawn. I kept my distance, nursing a whiskey and soda while Jessica chatted with a couple from out of town. I watched Carter from across the garden. Watched the way he worked the crowd, making people laugh, patting shoulders, dropping his perfect little sound bites. Marriage is a team sport, man. Oh, Dana keeps me in line. Don't worry. This suit, custom. Got it from a guy downtown. I'll send you his number. He was in his element. But that was about to change. At 5:30 sharp, the reception doors opened. We were guided into the glass atrium. High ceilings, crystal chandeliers, light bouncing off every surface. Long banquet tables lined with floral runners. Personalized name cards. A printed program tucked into every napkin fold. The house rental group, my parents, Carter, Dana, and a collection of aunts and uncles, had their own reserved table near the center. I saw it right away. A place card with Nolan on it seated at the end next to the emergency exit. I didn't walk toward it. Instead, I led Jessica to a different table, one closer to the front near the dance floor with a small gold sign that said, VIP reserved. One of the waiters approached as I sat down. Mr. Nolan? He asked, lowering his voice. I nodded. Miss Tricia says everything is in place. Just let us know when to proceed. Thank you, I said, offering a small smile. Give it 10 minutes. He nodded and walked off. Jessica leaned toward me. You ready? I sipped my drink. Been ready since I got the text asking for $860. The lights dimmed slightly. Music played. The MC took the mic and began welcoming everyone, moving swiftly into the dinner portion. People settled into their seats. Waiters began delivering appetizers. That's when Carter spotted me. I watched it unfold in real time. His head turned. He saw me at the VIP table. At first, there was confusion, then recognition, then confusion again. His smile wavered. Dana leaned over and said something. His eyes didn't leave mine. I raised my glass, tapped it once, and looked away. Now, for context, here's what they didn't know. About 3 weeks before the wedding, after I confirmed with the estate coordinator that my parents' group reservation was still pending payment, I made my move. I reserved the South Wing house, paid in full under my business name, quietly, privately. It wasn't hard. The estate had no idea I was related to the people previously listed. I used a corporate booking request through my business account and arranged for 6 custom keycards. When Tricia asked about guest names, I told her we'd finalize them closer to the date. I asked if I could designate someone to manage check-in on my behalf since I might be traveling internationally at the time. She said, of course. I gave her Devin's name. Then I waited. 1 week before the wedding, my mother sent another group message. Hey all. Nolan's been quiet. Just confirming you're still good for the house. If not, we'll need to find another person to cover your share. I replied, already taken care of. She responded with a heart emoji. That was all she wrote. So, imagine her surprise when she and the rest of the house group arrived at the estate the day before the wedding, tired and sweaty from the drive, only to be told by Tricia that the South Wing had already been checked into under a different name, and that their reservation had been canceled due to non-payment. They had no rooms, no backup plan, and it was high season. I hadn't been there to see it, but Devin told me everything. The sputtering, the calls, the flailing attempts to find a last-minute rental anywhere within 20 miles. The moment Dana realized she'd have to split a room with my mother, and Carter would be sleeping on a pull-out sofa in the bridal suite with Dana's sister and her newborn. Delicious. And now, sitting at that table, they were trying to figure out how I had ended up at the VIP table sipping aged whiskey, perfectly composed. But I wasn't done. 10 minutes later, after appetizers were cleared and people were loosening their ties, the MC tapped the mic again. "Before we move on to toasts, we have a quick housekeeping announcement," he said. "One of our guests, Mr. Nolan Winters, has generously covered tonight's bar tab in honor of the newlyweds." A murmur spread through the room. I stood up slowly, took the mic with a smile, and spoke into it calmly. "Just wanted to say congratulations to Taylor and Elise. You two deserve the best. No one else could have pulled off a day this beautiful. And I figured why not let everyone toast properly." Laughter, cheers, applause. I handed the mic back, sat down. Across the room, Carter's face was stone. Dana looked like she'd bitten into a lemon. But I wasn't smiling for them. I was smiling for me, because for the first time in my life I wasn't proving anything. I wasn't trying to be included. I wasn't showing up to be recognized. I was showing up because I wanted to and because I could. I didn't need a name card. I didn't need their seat at the table. I built my own. After the reception, Carter finally approached me. Waited until most guests were outside lining up for sparklers. His voice was low, clipped. "You really couldn't just let it go, huh?" I sipped the last of my drink. "Let what go?" "You know what?" I leaned in slightly. "You mean the bar stool? The unpaid dinner? The voicemail from Dana? Or maybe the part where Mom called me behind the scenes like I'm a stagehand in my own life?" He swallowed. "It wasn't meant like that." I nodded. "Doesn't matter. I'm done being your footnote." He looked away, jaw tight. "So this was revenge?" "No," I said, standing up. "This was a reminder." "Of what?" I smiled. "That I'm not the one who needs you anymore." And I left. Didn't wait for a response. Didn't look back. Jessica was already by the door holding my jacket. We walked out under the stars, past sparklers and laughter, past people who didn't know the history, didn't know what had been built or burned or buried. And for the first time in my life, I didn't care. I didn't need their apology. I didn't need closure because I had something better. I had peace. And I had the final word. Now on to the next story. Story 4. I'm Michael, and I'm 24 years old. For as long as I can remember, my family has revolved around one person. My older brother, Nathan. He was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. If he got a C in school, it was the teacher's fault. If I got an A-, my parents would shake their heads and tell me I wasn't living up to my potential. That's the rhythm my life always followed. Nathan shining in the spotlight while I was shoved into the shadows, expected to quietly make do with whatever scraps of attention were left over. I grew up understanding that in our house, love wasn't something shared equally. It was a currency my parents invested entirely into Nathan. The first memory that still stings was when I was about 12. I had been saving allowance money for months to buy a new set of art supplies. Drawing was my escape, my little corner of happiness. But one morning, I went to grab my jar of bills and coins, and it was gone. My mom casually told me at dinner that Nathan needed some extra lunch money, and that she'd used mine because, in her words, "You'll get over it faster." I remember sitting there in silence, the spaghetti on my plate going cold, realizing that in this family, my wants were always negotiable, but his were sacred. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, promising myself that one day I'd find a way to make all of this mean something. That my effort, my patience, and my endurance wouldn't go unnoticed forever. Years later, the pattern never changed. It only grew sharper. By the time Nathan turned 18, my parents practically built his life for him. They paid for his driving lessons, helped him get a job through one of Dad's old friends, and even gave him their old car. Meanwhile, when I asked if I could sign up for an after-school tutoring program to prep for college scholarships. My mom frowned and said, "We can't afford luxuries like that." Luxuries? That word burned into me. My education, my future, was considered a luxury, while Nathan's every whim was a necessity. Then came the day that defined the rest of my life. I was 17, just about to graduate high school. I had gotten into a decent college, and though my parents never offered much support, I thought I could rely on the savings account that my grandparents had started for me when I was a baby. They used to tell me every time they visited that this account was for Michael's education, no matter what. Over the years, I'd heard my parents mention it too, always vaguely, always dismissively. But it was the only financial security I thought I had. That fund was supposed to be mine, my ticket out. But when I brought up tuition at dinner one night, my dad exchanged a look with my mom. That look told me everything before he even opened his mouth. "We had to use the money," he said flatly. My fork froze in midair. "What do you mean you used it?" My chest felt like it was collapsing inward. My mom jumped in, her voice calm like she was explaining something obvious to a child. "Your brother needed a reliable car to commute to work. We couldn't let him fail. You're smart, Michael. You'll find a way to make it without the savings." Nathan needed it more. The words echoed in my head. Nathan needed it more. My college fund. Years of careful saving and promises from my grandparents. Gone. Converted into shiny metal and leather seats parked in our driveway. That night, Nathan stood proudly by his new car, grinning like a king. My parents fussed over him, taking photos, telling him how proud they were. I stood on the porch, my acceptance letter folded in my pocket, wondering how I was supposed to walk miles to work while they celebrated the theft of my future. The months that followed were brutal. I picked up shifts at a local diner, sometimes walking 40 minutes in the rain just to clock in. I watched Nathan drive past me more than once, music blasting, windows down, not even slowing enough to acknowledge me. Sometimes I'd get home late at night and see him tossing his keys on the kitchen counter, complaining about how annoying it is to pay for gas. My parents would nod sympathetically, pulling bills from their wallets to cover him, while I slipped off to bed with blistered feet and aching legs. The bitterness dug deep into me, but so did determination. Couldn't collapse. I couldn't let this be the end of my story. That was when I learned how to endure. Every step I walked to work, every hour I studied under flickering diner lights after shifts, every time I smiled at rude customers just to keep my paycheck, it all layered into something heavier, something sharper. I was carrying not just my dreams, but a quiet, seething anger. My parents thought they had robbed me of a future, but what they really did was light a fire I refused to let die. And then, years later, everything changed. The years after high school were some of the hardest of my life, but they also shaped me more than I ever thought possible. I worked doubles at the diner and picked up odd jobs anywhere I could. Landscaping, delivering groceries, cleaning offices. I did it all. Meanwhile, Nathan cruised around town in that shiny car bought with my future, posting pictures on social media about hard work paying off. The irony never failed to make me laugh bitterly under my breath. But if there's one thing I learned, it's that silence can be powerful. I didn't scream, didn't argue, didn't let them see me break. I let them believe I was defeated, when in reality, I was building something in secret. But while I was clawing my way through those early years, the favoritism at home only grew sharper, cutting deeper every time I visited. My parents liked to act as though Nathan's success was a shared family achievement, and my struggles were solely my own fault. I remember one night when I came home after a 12-hour shift, smelling like fryer grease and coffee. Nathan was lounging on the couch, scrolling through his phone while Mom fussed over him with a plate of food. Dad looked me up and down as I walked in, exhausted, and said, "Michael, maybe if you were more like your brother, you wouldn't be working yourself to death." Nathan chuckled without even looking up. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted iron, but I didn't say a word. There were countless small cuts like that. At family dinners, conversation always revolved around Nathan, his job, his car, his future plans. If I tried to share something, Mom would wave her hand and say, "We'll talk about that later." Later never came. On birthdays, Nathan got gifts wrapped in glossy paper, expensive headphones, new clothes, gadgets. When it was my turn, I got socks, maybe a cheap wallet, and always the phrase, "We're saving money these days. You understand." But the worst came during my second year of college. Yes, I found a way to get there despite them. I had scraped together enough scholarships, grants, and loans to enroll at a state school, balancing classes with brutal work hours. One weekend, I came home to find Nathan proudly announcing that Mom and Dad had co-signed a loan for him so he could start his own business. A car detailing shop, of all things. He'd been watching YouTube tutorials for months and suddenly fancied himself an entrepreneur. I remember sitting there clutching the strap of my worn-out backpack, listening to Dad say, "Sometimes you have to take risks for the child who's going places." That sentence nearly broke me. The child who's going places. I had been killing myself trying to make something of my life. And yet, in their eyes, Nathan was the only one worth gambling on. That night, I went back to campus and studied until dawn, tears blurring the pages of my textbooks. I swore to myself again that one day they'd regret every word, every choice that painted me invisible. The tension didn't just stop with favoritism. It spilled into outright manipulation. During breaks, when I came home, my parents would guilt-trip me about not contributing enough money to the household. "Nathan has expenses," Mom would say, "and you've always been so independent. Can't you help out a little more?" It baffled me how they could look me in the eyes and ask for money, knowing I was drowning in debt and working 2 jobs while Nathan burned through cash on business ideas and late-night parties. Once, they even asked if I could put my name down on a credit card for Nathan to build his credit. I laughed right in their faces and walked out. But inside, I felt sick at how shameless they had become. The more they tried to pull me back into their orbit, the more distance I put between us. Phone calls went unanswered. For holidays, I made excuses to stay on campus. I focused on my work, my studies, my slow but steady climb upward. I told myself that success would be my revenge. But at night, lying awake in my cramped dorm, I couldn't shake the anger that simmered beneath everything. I didn't just want to succeed. I wanted them to see it, to choke on it, to realize they had gambled away the one child who had actually been fighting for something real. And yet, the deeper I pulled away, the harder they pushed. My parents started showing up unannounced at my apartment near campus, bringing food containers with Nathan's leftovers, as if that would lure me back. They'd lecture me about family sticking together, while simultaneously reminding me how much they had sacrificed for Nathan. At one point, Mom even tried to guilt me by saying, "We wouldn't have been able to get him that car if you hadn't been so understanding." Understanding. That was her word for it, as if I had agreed to let them rip the rug out from under me. By the time I turned 21, I had stopped seeing them altogether unless I had no choice. I graduated quietly without telling them the date of the ceremony, and when I got my first job offer, I celebrated with friends instead of family. But the tension was always there, hanging over me like a storm cloud. I knew that one day they'd come back around, not with apologies but with expectations. That's the thing about people like my parents. They don't see betrayal when they commit it. They only see opportunity when they think you've risen high enough to be useful again. And I was right. That day came sooner than I expected. Started with a phone call. The phone call came on a rainy Tuesday night, just as I was wrapping up a late shift at the office. I was 23 then, only a year into my first real job after college. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid decently, and I was finally starting to feel the ground steady beneath me. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and when I saw Mom on the screen, my gut twisted. I hadn't spoken to her in months, and calls from my parents were never good news. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Michael." Her voice came sugary sweet in a way that immediately put me on edge. "It's been too long. How are you?" I gave a short, clipped reply. "Busy." "What's going on?" There was a pause, the kind that told me she was gearing up for something. Then she sighed dramatically. "It's about Nathan. He's in a bit of trouble. You know how hard he's been working on his business, right?" I almost laughed out loud. Hard work. The last I'd heard, his car detailing shop was bleeding money, and he'd been bragging online about weekend trips to Vegas. But I bit back the comment, letting her continue. He just needs a little help, honey. The bank won't extend him any more credit, and your father and I have already put so much into him. We thought, since you're doing well now, you could step in, just until he gets back on his feet. I stopped walking, the rain dripping off my jacket as her words sank in. They wanted me? Me? The son they'd robbed blind, to bail Nathan out? My throat tightened, but I kept my voice even. No, I can't do that. There was silence, then a sharp edge in her tone. Michael, he's your brother. Family helps family. I hung up without another word. My hands were shaking, not just from anger, but from the deep ache of realization. They hadn't changed at all. In their eyes, I wasn't a son. I was a resource, a backup plan for Nathan's failures. I thought that would be the end of it, but I underestimated just how far they would go. A few weeks later, I came home to my apartment after a long day to find an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a letter from the bank. At first, I thought it was junk mail, but when I read closer, my stomach dropped. It was a notice about a loan, one I had never applied for. A loan in my name. Panic set in. I called the bank immediately, demanding answers. After a maze of transfers, a representative confirmed it. There was a loan application with my information, name, address, social security number, signed and approved. The funds had already been dispersed. My blood ran cold as the details unfolded. The listed cosigner was Nathan. I remember sitting on my couch in stunned silence, the letter trembling in my hands. My parents hadn't just asked me for help. They had taken it. Somehow, they had used my information, my identity, to secure money for Nathan. It was fraud. It was betrayal on a level I hadn't even thought they were capable of. The next day, I drove to their house, my chest tight with fury. When I walked in, Nathan was sprawled on the couch, watching TV with a smug grin. Mom was in the kitchen, humming like everything was normal. Dad looked up from his newspaper with that same dismissive expression I'd known my whole life. I slammed the letter on the table. What is this? My voice cracked with rage. Mom barely flinched. Oh, don't be so dramatic, Michael. It's just paperwork. Nathan needed a chance and you weren't going to give it to him. You'll survive. You stole my identity. I spat. Dad folded the paper neatly and set it aside. Watch your tone. We're your parents. We know what's best for the family. The room spun. Nathan chuckled from the couch, not even bothering to look at me. Relax, little brother. It's an investment. When my business takes off, you'll thank us. That was the breaking point. Every ounce of patience I had held on to, every quiet promise to myself to rise above, it all cracked wide open. My parents had crossed a line so deep, so vile, that there was no going back. They had stolen from me once with my college fund. But this was worse. This was them looking me in the eye and telling me I didn't matter. Not as a son, not as a person, only as a tool to prop up their golden boy. I walked out of that house without another word, my heart pounding, my vision blurred with anger. But as the night wore on, something else began to burn beneath the fury. A clarity, a plan. If they wanted to use me like a resource, then they had no idea what kind of storm they had just unleashed. That was the night I stopped being their son in any sense of the word. That was the night I decided I wouldn't just get even. I would take back everything they had ever stolen from me and more. And the first step was already forming in my mind. After that night, it felt like the floor had dropped out from beneath me. I didn't tell anyone at first, no friends, no coworkers. I carried the weight of that fraud notice like a secret stone in my chest. Too heavy to share, too shameful to explain. Every time I checked the mail, there was another reminder. A bill, an interest statement, a warning about late payments I had never agreed to. My credit, something I had been carefully protecting while juggling scholarships and loans, was suddenly crumbling because of a decision I never made. The worst part wasn't even the money. It was the isolation. I couldn't shake the image of Nathan's smug grin, my parents' cold dismissal. The three people who were supposed to have my back had turned into the very people tearing my life apart. I'd walk to work some mornings, hands shoved deep in my pockets, wondering how much more I could take before I snapped. I had spent years swallowing their favoritism, their mockery, their constant reminders that I was the lesser son. But this was different. This wasn't just favoritism. This was sabotage. There were nights I didn't sleep at all. I'd sit at my desk staring at spreadsheets from my job, trying to focus while my thoughts drifted back to the mess my parents had created. I'd wonder if I was doomed to spend my life cleaning up after Nathan's failures. Sometimes I'd even question whether I was cursed somehow, born into a family that would rather break me than see me thrive. My grades, my work, my sacrifices, they never mattered to them. Only Nathan did. And yet, as the weight pushed me lower, something inside me hardened. If I couldn't rely on them, and by now it was crystal clear that I never could, then I had to build something for myself, something untouchable. I started researching late into the night, not just how to dispute fraudulent loans and protect myself legally, but how to protect everything I was building. I met with a financial advisor from my company, framing my situation as a hypothetical but absorbing every word about securing assets, establishing trusts, and shielding income. The more I learned, the more I realized that while my parents thought they had buried me, they had actually handed me the blueprint for freedom. Still, the immediate reality was harsh. I couldn't qualify for a decent apartment lease because of the loan. I had to keep my head down at work, terrified that if anyone dug into my credit, they'd assume I was reckless. For a few months, I lived in a crumbling studio with mold on the ceiling and neighbors who fought loudly through paper-thin walls. Every morning, I woke up to the sound of sirens or slammed doors, and I dragged myself to the office with dark circles under my eyes. Felt like rock bottom. Not the kind you hit once and recover from, but the kind that feels like home after a while. And yet I didn't tell my parents I was struggling. That was part pride, part strategy. If they thought they had crushed me, let them believe it. Let them think I was still the quiet, compliant son they could exploit. In reality, every bill I paid off, every dollar I tucked away was another brick in the wall I was building between myself and them. I avoided family gatherings entirely. When my mom called, I let it go to voicemail. When Dad sent texts like, "Call us. We need to talk about Nathan," I deleted them without replying. Nathan, of course, sent nothing at all. In his mind, I was already irrelevant, a stepping stone he had used and discarded. But while they saw me as weak, I was busy turning that weakness into something else. Every moment of silence I gave them was a moment I spent planning. One particularly low evening, I walked past a car dealership on my way home from work. The shiny vehicles gleamed under the lot lights, polished and perfect. For a second, I was 17 again, standing on the porch while my parents celebrated Nathan's brand new car, the one bought with my future. The memory stung, but it also sharpened me. I whispered under my breath, almost like a vow, "One day, I'll have something you can't touch." And slowly, painfully, I began to carve that path. I picked up freelance work on top of my job, coding projects, data analysis gigs, anything I could get my hands on. I lived frugally, saving every cent, stashing money in accounts my parents didn't even know existed. My days blurred into long stretches of work, study, and survival. But with every passing week, I could feel the tide turning, even if just slightly. It was still rock bottom. I was exhausted, lonely, and shackled to debts I hadn't created, but it wasn't permanent. I had decided it wouldn't be. And though I hadn't figured out the how just yet, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. When the time came, when my parents inevitably returned to bleed me dry again, I wouldn't just say no. I would make them regret every single choice that had led us here. The thought of that revenge became the one spark that kept me moving, even in the darkest stretches. And then, just when I thought I could finally breathe again, something happened that changed everything. The turning point didn't come with fireworks or some dramatic windfall. It was quiet, almost unnoticeable at first. One morning, I woke up in that dingy studio apartment, looked around at the water-stained ceiling and the peeling paint, and realized something strange. I wasn't sinking anymore. I was treading water, yes, but the current wasn't dragging me under like before. My debts were slowly shrinking, my side jobs were stacking into real money, and my credit dispute case was moving in my favor. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't drowning. I was climbing. I leaned harder into that momentum. My 9 to 5 job had started to notice the hours I poured in, and one of my managers pulled me aside after a big project and said, "Michael, you've got real potential. Have you ever thought about leadership?" I didn't say it out loud, but the question lit something in me. Leadership. Me, the invisible son, the one my family treated like an afterthought. That was the first time I realized I had something they couldn't take away. The respect of people who valued me for what I could do, not what I could provide for someone else. Within a year, I was promoted. My salary jumped, and with the promotion came more opportunities to network. I started attending industry events, shaking hands with people I never would have dreamed of meeting. Every time I walked into those rooms, I reminded myself, they don't know the boy whose parents stole his future. They only see Michael, the young professional who works hard, who delivers results, who belongs here. On the side, I kept building. The freelance projects that had once been my lifeline turned into something bigger. Word of mouth spread, clients referred me to other clients, and soon I had enough demand that I considered scaling it. I registered a small LLC, opened separate accounts, and started hiring part-time help. It was surreal. I had gone from barely keeping the lights on to managing a budding business, all without my family knowing a single detail. My living situation improved, too, with my credit finally repairing and my savings growing. I moved out of that moldy studio and into a modest one-bedroom in a quiet part of the city. It wasn't luxurious, but it was mine, and it didn't smell like mildew or fried food from the neighbor's late-night cooking. I bought furniture that wasn't secondhand, decorated the walls with art I liked, and for the first time, I felt like I had a home. I would sit on my couch after work, laptop open as I managed projects for my side business, and think, this is the life they said I'd never have. Meanwhile, Nathan's life began unraveling in small, almost poetic ways. Word trickled back through mutual acquaintances. His business was failing, the loan money had dried up, and he'd started hopping between jobs. Every post on his social media grew more desperate, all bluster about new schemes that never went anywhere. My parents, of course, doubled down in their support. Every once in a while, I'd get a voicemail from my mom saying things like, "Your brother just needs time. Don't you remember how much we've always been there for you both?" I would listen to her words with a kind of detached fascination, as if she were talking about someone else's family. But the more my star rose, the more I prepared. I didn't just want success for myself. I wanted armor. I wanted to be untouchable to ensure they could never again exploit me the way they had before. I set up my finances meticulously. Multiple accounts, legal protections, contracts for my business that made it impossible for anyone to piggyback off my name without consequences. I began investing, 2 stocks, mutual funds, even a stake in a small startup run by a friend I trusted. Piece by piece, I was building something far larger than just a paycheck. And yet, I never flaunted it. To my family, I stayed silent. I answered fewer and fewer of their calls. I let them believe whatever story they wanted to tell themselves about me. Maybe that I was still struggling, maybe that I was scraping by. The less they knew, the better, because deep down I knew the day would come when they'd come knocking again. And this time, I wanted to be ready. I'll never forget the first moment I truly realized how much had changed. I was at a client dinner, an upscale place with white tablecloths and menus that didn't have prices listed. My boss introduced me as one of our rising stars to a table full of executives, and I shook hands with men and women whose signatures controlled millions. I smiled, confident, steady. That night, as I walked home through the city lights, I thought back to all those nights trudging home from the diner, feet blistered, watching Nathan drive by in that car bought with my stolen future. And the thought that struck me hardest wasn't bitterness. It was this: I had built more for myself from nothing than they had ever imagined possible. Still, the voice in the back of my head never let me forget. Success wasn't enough. Not yet. Not when my parents had never apologized, never even admitted what they'd done. Not when Nathan still lounged in the wreckage of his failures, protected by the belief that someone would always clean up after him. And then, as if the universe had been waiting for the right moment, my parents reappeared in full force. They didn't just call this time. They showed up. It was a Saturday morning when they came. I had just poured myself a cup of coffee and was settling down to catch up on some project reports when there was a knock at the door. Not a polite knock, either heavy, insistent, the kind that makes your stomach clench. I opened it and there they were, my parents standing side by side like some grim parade, with Nathan a step behind them, his hands shoved into his hoodie pocket and his eyes darting around like he couldn't even meet my gaze. For a long moment, none of us spoke. I just stared at them, the steam from my coffee rising between us. My mom finally broke the silence with a forced smile. "Michael, you look well." Her voice cracked on the last word, and I noticed the lines on her face. Deeper now, her eyes tired. My dad's jaw was tight, his expression a blend of pride and desperation. Nathan looked worse than both of them. Unshaven, his posture slumped, a shadow of the smug brother I'd once known. "What do you want?" I asked flatly. My mom flinched but pressed on. We need your help. Things have been difficult. Nathan's business. It didn't work out, and the house. We're behind on payments. The bank." She faltered, then tried again. "Michael, we know you're doing well now. We thought maybe you could help us get back on our feet, just until things stabilize." I took a slow sip of coffee, letting the silence stretch until it became almost unbearable. "No," I said simply. I started to close the door, but my dad jammed his hand against the frame. "Don't be like this," he snapped. "You wouldn't even be where you are without the sacrifices we made. We gave your brother a chance, and now it's your turn to give back to the family." The audacity almost made me laugh. They had stolen from me, sabotaged me, mocked me, and now they were framing it as sacrifice. I studied them carefully, noting every crack in their armor, every sign of fear and need. That was when it hit me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the powerless one in this dynamic. They needed me. I didn't need them. I didn't let them in, but I didn't send them away immediately either. Instead, I let them talk. And talk they did. My mom begged. My dad barked. And Nathan pathetically mumbled about how things would turn around soon. If only I could lend him some money as an investment. Every word they spoke was a revelation. They weren't just struggling. They were desperate. And desperation makes people sloppy. Over the following weeks, they kept reaching out. Texts, voicemails, even handwritten letters slipped under my door. Each one revealed more. The mortgage was months behind. Nathan's debts were piled so high that collectors were circling, and my dad's retirement savings had been drained trying to plug holes. The picture was clear. The golden pedestal they'd built under Nathan had crumbled, and in the wreckage, they had nowhere else to turn but me. And here's the thing. I didn't just ignore them. I watched. I listened. I learned. I reached out quietly to some contacts I'd made in finance, asked a few hypothetical questions, and soon I had a detailed picture of exactly how deep their trouble went. Their house was teetering on foreclosure. Nathan's credit was worse than mine had ever been, and he had liens against his so-called business. They were cornered animals, and I was the one holding the door. At the same time, my own position was stronger than ever. My promotion at work had turned into a senior role, giving me influence and visibility. My side business was thriving with contracts that secured steady income well beyond my salary. I had investments maturing, assets locked safely away, and legal protections in place. Financially, I was untouchable. Emotionally, I was colder than I'd ever been. They couldn't guilt me anymore. Couldn't twist my sense of obligation. That part of me had died the night they stole my name for that fraudulent loan. The setup for revenge wasn't just about having money. It was about having power. For the first time in my life, I had both. They had taken everything from me once, but now they were standing at my door empty-handed, begging for scraps. And I realized something that made my chest tighten with a strange, almost thrilling kind of clarity. I didn't just want to say no. I wanted them to feel what I had felt all those years ago. Powerless, small, disposable. But timing is everything, and I wasn't going to rush. If they wanted help, I would let them believe it was possible, just long enough to set the stage. Just long enough to make the fall hurt more. That was when I started planning in earnest, drawing up the outlines of something that would not only deny them what they wanted, but expose them for what they had done. Every insult, every theft, every betrayal, they had handed me the tools for this moment. And soon, very soon, I'd use them. Revenge for me wasn't about fire and chaos. It wasn't about screaming in their faces or demanding they pay me back dollar for what they stole. That would have been too easy, too loud. No, I wanted something quieter, something colder. The kind of revenge that lingers, that twists the knife slowly every time they think about me. I wanted them to understand, not in one furious outburst, but in the silence that followed, that they had destroyed the one bridge they could never rebuild. The first step was to let them think they still had a chance. When my parents showed up again a week later, I didn't slam the door in their faces this time. I invited them in. The look of relief on my mom's face almost made me laugh. They sat at my table, looking around my apartment with thinly veiled surprise. It wasn't extravagant, but it was neat, modern, and filled with things I'd worked for myself. My dad cleared his throat, his pride fighting against his desperation. "We knew you'd come around," he said, as though I had agreed to anything. I listened as they laid out their problems again. The overdue mortgage, the debt collectors, Nathan's failing ventures. They spoke as though all of it was just a temporary setback, something a family contribution could easily fix. Nathan finally piped up, his voice sharp with entitlement despite the bags under his eyes. "If you just cover the mortgage and help me restart the business, we'll be fine. It's an investment in the family." I let them talk, nodding occasionally as though I was considering it. Then, with perfect calm, I said, "I'll think about it, but I need to see the paperwork. The mortgage, the debts, the business expenses. If I'm going to put money into this, I need full transparency." The relief on their faces was immediate. They agreed eagerly, promising to gather everything. My mom even touched my hand and whispered, "We knew you wouldn't abandon us." I smiled thinly, hiding the storm inside me. What they didn't realize was that I already had most of the information. Through contacts and careful research, I knew more about their finances than they thought possible. But asking for the paperwork wasn't about facts. It was about watching them hand me the rope they'd eventually hang themselves with. Over the next few weeks, they delivered stacks of documents. I took them politely, scanning each page as though I were genuinely considering helping. Behind closed doors, though, I compiled everything into a neat, devastating picture. Years of reckless spending, loans opened in my name, assets drained. All while Nathan burned through money on cars, parties, and empty ventures. They had destroyed themselves, and all I had to do was hold up the mirror. The moment came when they pressed me for an answer. We sat again at my kitchen table, the three of them looking at me like starving wolves waiting for meat. My dad leaned forward. "So, are you going to step up or not?" I opened a folder and slid the papers across the table. "Here's what I see," I said calmly. "You took my college savings and bought Nathan a car. You committed fraud by opening loans in my name. You've drained your retirement. Your house is on the edge of foreclosure, and Nathan owes more than he could pay back in 3 lifetimes. And now you want me to fix it." Their faces paled. Nathan tried to laugh it off, but the sound was weak, forced. My mom's hands trembled. My dad's jaw tightened, but even he couldn't mask the fear in his eyes. I leaned back, folding my arms. "Here's my decision. No, not a cent. You'll lose the house. Nathan will drown in his own debts, and you'll finally have to live with the consequences of every choice you made." The silence that followed was electric. My mom's eyes filled with tears, but I felt nothing. My dad started to protest, but I raised a hand to cut him off. "Don't. You made your bed when you chose him over me every single time. You don't get to crawl back now." I stood, walked to the door, and held it open. "Get out." They shuffled past me, broken in a way I had never seen before. Nathan muttered something under his breath, maybe an insult, maybe a plea, but I didn't care enough to listen. When the door shut behind them, I felt a calmness settle over me. It wasn't joy exactly. It was something sharper, cleaner. For once, I had the power and I had wielded it with precision. But the true revenge wasn't just in saying no. It was in making sure they had no way to twist the narrative, no way to paint me as the ungrateful son. I had the documents, the proof of everything they'd done, and I knew exactly what to do with them. Because if they thought losing my help was the worst that could happen, they were about to learn how wrong they were. The fallout was quieter than I imagined, but far more devastating for them. I didn't need to raise my voice or slam my fist on a table. My proof did all the work for me. I started with the fraudulent loan they had taken out in my name. I filed a full report with the bank, attaching the paperwork they themselves had handed over to me. When the fraud investigator called for a follow-up, I answered every question calmly, providing signatures, dates, and even the voicemail my mom had left months earlier, practically admitting they just needed to help Nathan. The investigation moved faster than I expected. Within weeks, the bank cleared me of liability. My credit, my future was safe. The loan, however, didn't just disappear. It shifted back to its origin. Them, my parents, and Nathan were now fully responsible for the debt they had tried to bury me under. Next came the mortgage. With the information I'd gathered, I quietly tipped off a legal aid office that specialized in foreclosure cases. I wasn't trying to save them. I wanted everything documented. Their reckless spending, their inability to pay, the fact that they had siphoned my savings into a car that Nathan had wrecked years earlier. The lawyers filed notices that became part of the public record. Anyone could now see just how badly they had mismanaged everything. Their respectable reputation in the neighborhood began to unravel overnight. And as for Nathan, his business debts caught up with him swiftly. Creditors began circling. I knew because one of them, recognizing my last name, accidentally contacted me first. I redirected them, of course, but not before forwarding them copies of the financial statements Nathan had so proudly shown me, claiming they were proof of his potential. With those documents, the creditors had everything they needed to press harder. The first real fallout came when my dad called me, his voice shaking with rage. "You destroyed us," he shouted. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I let him scream, then cut in with a voice as steady as stone. "No, Dad, you destroyed yourselves. I just stopped you from destroying me, too." And I hung up. After that, the calls stopped. Instead, I began hearing whispers from old neighbors and distant relatives. My parents had lost the house. Nathan had filed for bankruptcy. The family who once paraded their golden child around, mocking me as the lesser son, had become a cautionary tale in the community. Their downfall wasn't loud or dramatic. It was slow, humiliating, inescapable, exactly the way I wanted it. Months later, I drove past their old house on a whim. It was empty, the windows dark, a foreclosure notice taped to the door. Nathan's car, the one they had stolen my college fund to buy, was gone too, probably repossessed years back. For a moment, I stood there on the sidewalk, staring at the place where so much of my pain had been born. And instead of bitterness, I felt something colder. Closure. I never saw them again after that, not in person at least. I moved forward with my life, my career, my business. The people around me respected me for who I was and what I'd built, not for what they could take from me. That was the sweetest victory of all. And every now and then, when I catch my reflection in the glass of a high-rise office building, I remember the boy walking miles to work while his brother drove by in a stolen future. That boy became a man who built his own path brick by brick, while his so-called family collapsed under the weight of their choices. The last time my father's voice echoed in my head, shouting that I had destroyed them, I finally understood the truth. I hadn't destroyed them. I had simply stepped out of the shadow they forced me into and let them destroy themselves. Now on to the next story. Story 5. "I need a new car you'll co-sign," my sister texted. I replied, "Dream on." Minutes later, my father wrote in big letters, "Refuse and you're cut off from family events." That night, I called the bank and canceled their shared credit line. By 7:30 a.m., 36 missed calls piled up. It was a boring Thursday. Nothing special about it. I was sitting at my desk going through invoices when my phone buzzed. One of those long, self-important vibrations that usually meant trouble. It was a message from my sister. "I need a new car. You'll co-sign." No greeting. No explanation. Not even a question mark. Just a demand like I owed her something. For context, I'm Lucas, 32, work in logistics, I own my house, I pay my bills on time, and I've worked for every single thing I have. My sister, Hannah, is 28, still lives with my parents on and off, has had 6 jobs in 3 years, and burns through money like it's nothing. But because she's loud, dramatic, and good at crying in public, she's always been treated like the victim. Always. I stared at her message. I actually laughed. Then I replied, "Dream on." I didn't expect a reply from her. I expected her to go running to my parents, though. Right on cue, 10 minutes later, I got a message from my dad. All caps, "Refuse and you're cut off from family events." That was it. No. Can we talk? No. Let's figure this out. Just an ultimatum. Now, for most people, that kind of text might sting. For me, it was the final push I didn't even know I was waiting for. I stood up, walked straight to the kitchen, poured myself some coffee, and called the bank. There was a shared credit line I had with my parents, something I'd reluctantly agreed to open a couple years back during a guilt-heavy Thanksgiving dinner where everyone made it sound like I was the stable one and should be helping out more. My sister had already maxed it once, bought herself a high-end espresso machine and a $1,200 coat for job interviews. The bank said I could shut it down immediately. I didn't even blink. I signed the forms digitally, confirmed the closure, and had them send the termination notice to my email. Next morning, I woke up to 36 missed calls. 12 from Hannah, 9 from my dad, 8 from my mom. The rest were various cousins and one aunt who apparently just wanted to check in. I didn't answer any of them. I just let it all ring out. But here's what none of them wanted to admit. This wasn't about a car. This was about control. For years, I'd been treated like a resource. The responsible one, the calm one, the one who wouldn't fight back. They thought I'd cave like always. But not this time. You want history? Let's go back. 3 years ago, Hannah punctured 2 of my tires because I refused to let her borrow my car to drive to some music festival. She didn't even deny it. She posted a photo of my flat tires on her Instagram story with laughing emojis. My parents told me I was overreacting when I demanded they make her pay for the damage. They didn't even make her apologize. But the breaking point was last Christmas. We were having dinner at my parents' place. They had begged me to come after I initially said no. And midway through dessert, Hannah started one of her meltdowns. Something stupid about how I never support her dreams. She started screaming. I told her to calm down. She threw her drink at me. I stood up, walked into the kitchen, grabbed the scissors off the counter, came back, and cut off a chunk of her hair. The hair she obsessed over for years. Everyone froze. She screamed like someone had shot her. My mom cried. My dad stood there silent. And me? I was calm for the first time in years. They kicked me out, told me I had gone too far after inviting me, after she threw wine in my face. But I was the one who went too far. Fast forward to now. She wrecked the car I gave her. One of my 2 cars. I gave her the older one because she was unemployed and my parents were struggling. And not a single thank you. Just complaints about the AC and Bluetooth. Then she wrecked it because she was texting while driving. And instead of owning it, she blamed the brakes. Now she wants me to co-sign for a brand new car. And when I say no, I get threatened. Nah, that was the last time they got to pull that move. Because what they didn't know was I wasn't just saying no. I was gearing up for a long, deliberate revenge. Not petty revenge, smart revenge. Starting with cutting the credit line. Then came the next move and they never saw it coming. The silence after I killed the credit line didn't last long. By noon that day, the group chats were exploding. My mom sent a message in the family thread. "Lucas, we need to talk ASAP. This isn't like you." I left the chat. Not left the conversation. Left the chat entirely. Removed myself. That afternoon, I called a tow company and asked them to pick up the 2014 Camry I had signed over to Hannah. Well, sort of signed over. I never transferred the title officially. That was my safety net. I'd paid for that car, insured it under my name, and she was just borrowing it until she got back on her feet. Except she'd been getting back on her feet for 18 months. They towed it from the front of my parents' house. She had parked it there while pretending she was saving up for a down payment on something better. I guess better now meant convincing me to buy her a Tesla. She called me the moment she saw the empty driveway. I didn't answer. Instead, I sent her a photo of the car back in my garage. Then, I turned off my phone for the rest of the day. That night, my cousin Jake texted me from his work number. He's one of the few in the family who sees things for what they are. She's been flipping out all day. Screamed at your mom. Your dad tried to call me to talk some sense into you. I told him, maybe it's time someone put Hannah in her place. That was the first time in years I felt like someone in the family finally got it. The next morning, I drove to work and found a post-it on my windshield. Petty, grow up. Handwriting I'd recognize anywhere. Hannah's, which was rich coming from someone who once poured soda into my laundry because I snapped too hard at her for stealing my laptop charger. I knew what would come next. The manipulation phase. When the tantrum didn't work and the threats didn't work, she tried the sympathy card. Sure enough, 2 days later, my mom called. I answered this time mostly out of curiosity. She said Hannah was having a breakdown and that I needed to be the bigger person. I asked her if she remembered the tire incident. The hair, the dinner she begged me to attend before throwing me out. She went quiet. Then she said something I'll never forget. Well, you know how she is, but she's family. And I replied calmly, so am I. Then I hung up. That Sunday, there was a birthday party for one of our younger cousins. I wasn't invited. Jake texted me a photo from it. Hannah was there telling everyone I had stolen her car. She left out the part where I paid for it, the insurance, the maintenance, the registration. She left out the part where I'd warned her months ago that if she didn't start contributing something, even gas, I was taking it back. But I wasn't surprised. What did surprise me was that Aunt Valerie pulled her aside in front of everyone and asked loudly, "Why don't you have your own car by now?" Apparently, the look on Hannah's face could have cracked concrete. The family was starting to split. Lines were being drawn, and I wasn't finished. Not even close. Because if they wanted to play dirty, I was about to show them how deep I was willing to dig. About a week after I took back the Camry, things got quiet. Too quiet. No texts, no voicemails, not even a passive-aggressive meme sent through our mom's Facebook account. I knew that wasn't a good sign. Silence in our family never meant peace. It meant someone was scheming. Then Jake sent me a heads up. Hannah was telling people I had emotionally abused her for years and that I'd always acted like I was better than everyone. She was rewriting our history like it was a bad Lifetime movie. According to her, she was the black sheep, always trying to please a brother who never supported her. Funny, because I still had the receipts from the time I paid off her credit card debt just so she wouldn't destroy our parents' credit when she opened an account in my dad's name. Still, I knew what this was. It was all leading to one thing. She was trying to build a narrative to guilt the rest of the family into isolating me. What she didn't know was that some of them were already calling me to say they were sick of her. 2. Uncle Dennis called me one night, half whispering from his garage like he was making a drug deal. "She's gotten worse, man. Your dad tried to bring up the car thing and she started crying before he even finished his sentence. You did what had to be done." That was when I decided to strike a little deeper. I was going to remind her and everyone else what happens when you push someone who's already got nothing left to lose. I made a call to a local auto auction I had connections with. I put the Camry up for sale. It sold in 2 days. Cash, no trace. No way she'd ever get it back. I sent her a text with the confirmation photo of the car being loaded onto a truck. Sold. Don't worry. You won't have to be embarrassed by my car anymore. No reply. 3 days later, Jake sent me a picture from Hannah's Instagram story. It was a throwback photo. Her in high school flipping her long chestnut hair dramatically by the beach. Caption: "It always grows back stronger, just like me." So now we were bringing that back, the infamous haircut. They never got over it. Not her, not my parents, not even my grandma. The family loved pretending it came out of nowhere, like I just snapped and went all Edward Scissorhands in the middle of dinner. What they always conveniently forgot was that Hannah threw a glass of wine in my face first. That she screamed at me in front of a table full of people, called me a control freak, and said I'd never be loved because I was too cold. I remember standing there dripping red wine, everyone silent, no one defending me. And I remember walking into the kitchen, picking up the scissors, walking back to her, and cutting 6 inches off the hair she spent years babying. The sound of the scissors closing, snip, was the only thing anyone heard for 10 seconds straight. That was my revenge then. And it worked because Hannah stopped speaking to me for months after that. The peace was glorious. But they kicked me out of the house that night. My own parents, even though they were the ones who invited me in the first place. Now here we were again. A different situation but the same pattern. She pushed. I pushed harder. And then came the message that told me she hadn't learned a single thing. It was 2:15 a.m. when it came through. Just 2 words. You'll regret this. The last time she said that, my tires were slashed. This time I was ready. I checked the security cameras on my house. All clear. But the next move wasn't going to be hers. It was mine because she and my parents still had keys to my house. That was about to change. By now, I didn't sleep easily. I wasn't paranoid. I was prepared. After Hannah's late night, you'll regret this message. I knew the countdown had started. She wasn't someone who threatened and then waited. She always acted fast, stupid, and loud. So, I took the morning off work and drove straight to the hardware store. New locks, reinforced deadbolts, and a fresh set of smart cams for the backyard. I paid extra to have a locksmith come that same afternoon. By 3 p.m., every lock was changed. It felt symbolic in a way I didn't expect, like I was sealing off a part of my life. But I wasn't even close to done. That evening, I found something unexpected. An envelope jammed into my mailbox. No postage, handwritten with my name. It wasn't from Hannah. The handwriting was too neat. I opened it slowly, already expecting some dramatic plea from my mom. But it wasn't a plea. It was a copy of a letter Hannah had written to our parents. She had written it weeks ago, before the car incident even started. I read every line like it was a confession. She had planned everything, the text, the manipulation, even the meltdown. She told them that if she could get me to co-sign, she'd let me think she was grateful. Just long enough to get the car. Then she'd ghost me. She wrote, "He's soft. He acts like he's cold. But he's desperate to be liked. He'll cave. He always does. Once I get the car, he can go back to pretending he has boundaries." There were more lines about how she deserved a win and how I owed her for all the times I made her feel small. I didn't realize I was gripping the paper until it nearly tore in my hands. There was no signature, but at the bottom, in small print, was another handwritten line. "You didn't get this from me, but I'm tired of watching you take the fall, Jake." I stared at it for a while, then folded it back neatly and slid it into my safe. And just like that, whatever guilt I might have had left about the car, the credit line, or even the haircut vanished. They were planning to use me again. But now I had proof. That night, I got a call from my mom. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was almost laughable. She said the family was discussing an intervention, that Hannah was going through a hard time, and that she hoped I could find it in my heart to come over this weekend and talk things through. I sat in my kitchen listening to her voice, drinking a coffee like I was watching a documentary about someone else's life. Then I remembered the spare key and the fake rock near the porch. I stepped outside to remove it. The second I lifted the rock, I saw it was gone. My stomach dropped. Someone had already taken it. I bolted back inside, checked the security app. There it was. Motion detected. 2:48 a.m. the night before. A figure creeping up to the porch. Not Hannah. It was my dad. He looked around, took the key, and left. No knock, no message, just a silent move like a thief. The next day, I installed an alarm system and set the notification for all entries. Then I changed the Wi-Fi password. I was done, but I wasn't going to confront them. I had a better plan. And it started with a little family barbecue the following weekend. An event I wasn't invited to, but one I planned to attend anyway as a guest of someone else. And I wasn't coming empty-handed. That Saturday, the skies were painfully perfect. Blue, cloudless, and warm. The kind of day people post about with cheesy captions and grilled corn. The family barbecue was being held at Uncle Rick's place. He's the type that shows up twice a year, drinks everyone's beer, and pretends to be Switzerland when things go sideways. But he'd always liked me better than Hannah. Said it was because I kept my mouth shut until it mattered. So when I texted him Friday night and said I wanted to come, he didn't hesitate. Show up. No drama. But if anything goes down, I didn't invite you. Got it. I told him I'd be invisible. I lied. I arrived 30 minutes late, wearing sunglasses and a grin. Half the family did double takes. My mom looked like she'd seen a ghost. Hannah. She stared at me like she was trying to set me on fire with her eyes. I walked past her, grabbed a soda, said hi to Jake and Uncle Dennis, and sat down under the pergola like I owned the place. 10 minutes in, everyone was pretending it wasn't weird that I was there. Conversations shifted around me like I was furniture. Someone turned on a Bluetooth speaker to play music and people started to relax. That's when I made my move. I had my own Bluetooth speaker in my backpack, just a tiny one. Nothing flashy. I synced it to my phone and queued up an audio file. It was a recording, not of a conversation. Something better. It was me reading Hannah's letter, the one I'd found in the mailbox. Every word. I had matched the tone. Calm, flat, unmistakable. I waited for a moment of quiet, then switched the connection. The song cut off. Then my voice filled the yard. He's soft. He acts like he's cold, but he's desperate to be liked. He'll cave. He always does. Heads turned. Once I get the car, he can go back to pretending he has boundaries. The silence was instant. A few people looked confused. Jake locked eyes with me. Then the rest of the letter played. Every line, every smug little sentence. When it ended, I stood up and turned off the speaker. No one said a word. My mom asked if it was fake. I didn't answer. My dad started to say something, then stopped. And Hannah, she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just walked into the house. 5 minutes later, she left. Didn't say goodbye to anyone. People kept eating, but the vibe had collapsed. Conversations turned low and suspicious. I saw two cousins whispering while glancing toward my mom. Jake came over and handed me a beer. Wasn't expecting a whole speech, he said. I shrugged. Sometimes people need help hearing themselves. That night, I went home, locked the door, and put my phone on silent. But around midnight, I got a text from an unknown number. It said, "You win this time." No name, but I knew who it was. She wasn't giving up. And that's why I had one last thing to do, the final step. Because even after all of it, they still had a copy of my house key. And after what I saw on the camera feed a few nights later, I knew I couldn't trust any of them. 3 days after the barbecue, I got home from work and found a footprint on my welcome mat. Not dirt, mud. My neighborhood's bone dry. No rain for a week. I checked the cameras. 1:17 a.m. someone walked up the steps, tried the handle, stood there for 2 full minutes, then left. They didn't knock. They just tried. But what stood out wasn't the figure. It was what they were holding. Paper grocery bag. Something inside it. Small, light-colored, maybe folded clothes, maybe something else. Something they were planning to leave or maybe take. The cameras weren't high-res enough to catch a face. But I didn't need one because 2 hours later, I got a text from my dad. "I don't want to be in the middle anymore, but she's your sister." I didn't reply. I just stared at it until the screen went black. That night I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, because I was done. Done with the idea that I was the one who had to be reasonable. That I had to forgive people just because we shared DNA. The next morning I called the locksmith again. This time I replaced everything. Front door, garage, back entrance, even the lock on the inside door to the laundry room. I changed the alarm code. Changed the garage code. Called the smart home company and deactivated all previously used fobs. They were out, all of them. That weekend I sent one group text. Just one. Effective immediately. No one is to enter my property. If you have a key, it is now useless. This is not a discussion. I'm done being your doormat. I didn't say I still love you or please respect this. I wasn't asking for anything. Jake texted back within a minute. Finally. Uncle Dennis gave me a thumbs-up emoji. That man doesn't even use emojis. My parents didn't respond. Neither did Hannah. But I did get one unexpected text later that week from my grandma. I don't understand everything, but I trust you. That one hit harder than I expected. Now it's been a few months. No more calls, no visits, no surprise footsteps on my porch. I haven't blocked anyone, but the silence has become its own kind of message. I heard through Jake that Hannah tried to get another car, this time on her own. She failed the credit check twice. Ended up buying an ancient used hatchback with cash from one of her wellness coaching gigs. Jake sent me a picture. She had named it Karma. I didn't laugh. I just deleted it. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not planning anything. No more speeches, no more proof, no more performances. The locks are changed. The door is shut. And for the first time in a long, long time, it's quiet. The good kind. The final update. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd go months without talking to my parents, that I'd walk away from my sister completely, that I'd shut the door literally and figuratively on everything I used to call family, I would have laughed. I'd always been the one who smoothed things over. The one who apologized first, even when I wasn't wrong. The one who gave and gave because I thought that's what you were supposed to do when you loved people. Turns out, love without respect is just manipulation with better PR. What happened with Hannah? Yeah, it started with a car. But it wasn't about the car. Not really. It was about years of one-sided expectations, about me being treated like a bank account and a punching bag rolled into one. It was about how my parents raised her to believe the world owed her something and raised me to believe it was my job to provide it. And the worst part, I believed it for a long time. I thought keeping the peace meant keeping quiet. I thought saying no made me cruel. I thought boundaries were for people who didn't care. But when I finally stopped bending, everything snapped. And here's the truth. They didn't fall apart because I walked away. They fell apart because I stopped playing the role they needed me in. The one where I always came through, even when I was being used, even when I was being lied to. And the fallout, it didn't destroy me. Freed me. Now, months later, the quiet in my life isn't cold. It's clean. My days don't revolve around checking my phone with a sense of dread. I don't second-guess myself when I spend money on something I want. I don't lie awake at night rehashing conversations where I tried to justify a boundary that should have never been up for debate. I rebuilt my home the way I rebuilt my peace. Lock by lock, choice by choice. I got new routines. I got time back. I got space. Physical, emotional, mental, to finally ask myself who I was outside of their chaos. And you know what's wild? I don't miss them. Not really. I miss the idea of them. The version of my parents I used to imagine when I was a kid. The ones who would protect me, back me up, hold everyone to the same standard. The version of my sister who might have grown into someone who didn't lie to get ahead. Who didn't weaponize guilt like it was a hobby. But that version never existed. I made them up because I needed to believe family meant something more than shared history and holiday photos. Turns out it doesn't. Family isn't who you're stuck with. It's who shows up when it doesn't benefit them. It's who respects your boundaries even when it inconveniences them. It's who tells the truth even when it's hard right now. That's Jake. That's Uncle Dennis. That's a couple of friends who sent me frozen meals when they heard I was cutting ties and told me they were proud of me. That's me. I'm not bitter. I'm not plotting some dramatic comeback or hoping they call with some perfect apology that makes everything all right. Because I don't need an apology anymore. I just needed my life back. Now on to the next story. Story 6. At my mother's birthday, I walked in with a cake my kids helped bake. My dad met me at the door and said, "Don't make this about you." I nodded, set the cake down, and left. 15 minutes later, I got a text from my brother. "Why did the bank decline Mom's card?" I replied, "She said not to make it about me, so I didn't." 2 hours later, my dad showed up at my door, furious. I opened it and said, "I don't know why I still let myself hope for anything with him. I should have known better. But this year felt different. Or at least I told myself it would be. My mom was turning 55 and I'd spent months planning something that might finally mean something or at least show them that I was still trying. She was never the warm type. When she left us, I was 10, disappeared for 6 years, came back like nothing had happened, and pretended I was just part of the background. My dad didn't protest. He never did. And my younger brother, Jeremy, born after she came back, was the reset button. Everything went to him. Attention, affection, expectations. I was the family's old news. But I thought maybe a gesture would shift something. Maybe if I gave enough, it would finally be enough. So, for her 55th birthday, I saved up and bought her a car. Nothing flashy, but new, practical, clean. I imagined how it would feel to surprise her, give her the keys after dinner, tell her it was from me and the kids. My two had spent the morning helping me bake a cake, chocolate hazelnut, her favorite. They were proud of it. We even wrote, "Happy birthday, Grandma," in messy blue icing. I told them this would be a special day. We pulled up to the house around 5. I was carrying the cake. My kids ran ahead, buzzing with excitement. I barely made it to the front steps before the door opened and my dad was standing there. No smile, no welcome. He just looked at me, said, "Don't make this about you." That was it. No happy birthday, no hello. Just that line, like I was some kind of interruption to their party. I didn't say anything. I walked into the kitchen, set the cake down on the counter, turned to my kids, and said we were heading back home. They were confused, but followed me. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. 15 minutes later, I got a text from Jeremy. "Why did the bank decline Mom's card?" I texted back. She said not to make it about me. So I didn't. 2 hours later, I opened the front door to find my dad standing there, red-faced, breathing hard. He didn't even wait. He just started shouting about how I embarrassed them, made a scene, ruined her birthday, said, "I always do this, always make it about myself." I let him finish. Then I walked over to the counter, opened the drawer, pulled out the key fob, and held it up. It still had the dealership tag on it. He froze. He knew exactly what it meant. I told him the car was parked 2 blocks away. It was supposed to be her surprise, but I'd left instead because clearly today wasn't supposed to be about me. His whole mood changed. Suddenly soft, polite. He said the kids should come back. Grandma was asking for them. Maybe we could all just move on. I said we weren't coming. He tried again. Said they were just tired, not thinking clearly, that I misunderstood. Then he left, quieter than he arrived. That night, I saw their Facebook post. Tons of pictures of the party. The cake we made was in every one, but they'd removed me from the family group. I wasn't tagged. And the caption, "So sad our beloved son couldn't make it today. We missed you." It was disgusting. And now, I had this expensive car sitting outside mocking the idea that I could ever buy my way into being part of this family. I didn't know what to do with it. I just knew I wasn't giving it to them. I didn't sleep much that night after the Facebook post. It stayed in my head like a buzzing fly. Those fake smiles, that cake front and center in all the pictures. The caption, "So sad our beloved son couldn't make it today. We miss you." I stared at it until I couldn't anymore. Then I went outside and looked at the car. Still parked on the side street, still spotless, still not for them. The next morning was quiet, thankfully. I dropped the kids off at school, made some coffee, sat down at the kitchen table, and tried to talk myself into thinking it would all blow over. Around 10, I heard the knock. It was my mom. I hadn't seen her at my door in over 5 years. I opened it and there she was, holding a cheap plastic basket wrapped in cellophane. Store-bought muffins, the kind with that weird chemical lemon smell. She smiled like we were old friends bumping into each other by chance. Said she was just in the area. I asked if everything was all right. She shrugged. Said she just wanted to say hi. Asked if the kids were home. I told her they were at school. She acted surprised, like it was shocking that kids were in school at 10 o'clock on a weekday. Then she handed me the muffins. Said maybe she'd drop off some old children's books next time. I said, "Okay." And she left. That was it. The next day, it was my dad. He showed up holding a new Lego set, one of those $80 Star Wars ones. He said he got it on sale, like that explained everything. Then he asked if the kids were around. Same pattern. Smiled awkwardly. Said maybe we should swing by some time for dinner. He even asked about my job, which he hadn't done since I was 24 and working night shifts at the gas station. Said I looked like I was doing well. The following day, it was her again, this time with a box of chocolates and a book of Sudoku puzzles she said my son might like. Then my dad again, this time with 2 pizzas and a comment about how I must be busy and probably don't have time to cook. Every time they came, they asked about the kids first. Every time they acted like the past decade hadn't happened. No apology, no reference to the party, no mention of the car, but I saw the glances. My dad lingered at the front window once, said, "That yours?" while nodding vaguely toward the driveway. I just said, "Yeah." It was parked out there now. I had moved it from the street. No plates on it yet. Dealership sticker still in the window. I wanted them to see it. Let them wonder. The kids, of course, were thrilled. My daughter lit up when my mom brought over a stack of old fairy tale books. My son couldn't stop talking about the Lego set. I didn't say anything. I didn't tell them what this really was. I wasn't going to put that on them. For 7 years, my kids were invisible to them. No babysitting offers, no random visits. Jeremy's son, Nathan, had 3 bikes before he turned 8. My daughter was still using the scooter we found at a garage sale. Jeremy's family got Disney trips. Mine got a belated birthday card with the name misspelled. And now they were dropping by every day, asking if they could take the kids out for a few hours sometime, laughing louder than they needed to, talking about how much they missed family time. I didn't argue. I didn't call them out because I knew exactly what they were doing. They thought they could earn it back. They thought if they played perfect grandparents for a few weeks, I'd forget everything, that I'd hand them the keys with a smile and thank them for finally showing up. I made no promises. I gave no signals, and they weren't getting that car. Not after 55 years of rewriting history. It had been nearly 3 weeks of the same routine. Daily visits, forced smiles, surprise gifts, and over-the-top praise for the kids. They never stayed long, just enough to be seen, to leave something behind, to plant a little more doubt in my children's minds about who their grandparents really were. I played along. I wasn't rude. I didn't argue, but I didn't encourage it either. Then one Tuesday afternoon, something shifted. My mom showed up again unannounced, but this time she had Nathan with her, Jeremy's son. She said they were on their way to a dentist appointment nearby and thought they'd just stop in. Nathan ran inside like he owned the place. Didn't even say hi. Headed straight for my son's room and shut the door behind him. 10 minutes later, my son walked into the living room holding one of his comic books, ripped in half. I stared at him. He didn't cry, just stood there quietly and said, "Nathan said it was boring." I walked to the hallway and opened the door. Nathan was sprawled out on the bed playing with my son's Switch. My mom was sitting in the kitchen pretending to read the Sudoku book she gave us last week. I told her we were done for today. She didn't move at first, just kept her eyes on the book and said, "You don't have to overreact." I said it again, slower. "We are done." She stood up without a word, called Nathan, and left. Didn't even close the door. The next day, no one showed up. Or the day after that. Then Thursday evening, around dinner time, I got a knock at the door. I opened it and both my parents were standing there, arms crossed. I could feel it before they spoke. This wasn't a visit. My dad started first. Said they were tired of playing games. Said they'd been generous, thoughtful, even apologetic, and that I was still holding some kind of grudge. My mom jumped in and said I was raising my kids to be bitter and isolated, that I needed to stop using the past to justify being selfish. Then she asked about the car. Just like that. No pretense, no smile. She asked flat out if it was still meant for her or if I was planning to just keep it sitting there out of spite. I didn't say anything for a long time. The kids were in the other room again. I could hear them giggling, completely unaware. Then I told them the truth. I had wanted to get along. I really did. And that it hurt more than I could admit that things turned out like this. I went to the drawer, pulled out the keys, and held them up again. Same as the last time. But this time, I didn't just show them. I tossed them on the table and said, "This is what you lost the second you told me not to make it about me." They stared at the keys. And then, like someone flipped a switch, my dad changed his tone. Said I was being dramatic. Asked if the kids wanted to go to Grandma's. Said she was waiting for them. Said Nathan would be there and they had cake from the bakery this time. Smiled like nothing had just happened. I shook my head and said they weren't going. He laughed, short and fake, and said, "You know they're still waiting for you, right? They're just a little annoyed. That's all." I didn't reply, just waited. Eventually, they left. Not angry this time, just confused or maybe rattled. Later that night, they posted again on Facebook. More party photos. Another forced caption, "It's a pity our beloved son couldn't come. We saved him a slice." I tried to ignore it, but then I saw something else. My account had been removed again. And this time, my daughter came up to me and asked why Grandma said online that I didn't come because I had more important things to do. I didn't even know how to explain that to a child. That was the moment I knew this wasn't about the car anymore. This was about control, reputation, narrative, and they were losing all of it. By the end of the third week, the pattern was clear. They'd stopped trying. No more daily visits. No more drop-ins with puzzles or muffins or boxes of cereal they pretended were special. No more faint interest in bedtime stories or school projects. My front step, once used as their stage, was quiet again. Peaceful, but cold. At first, I thought maybe they finally understood. Maybe they took a hard look in the mirror and saw what I saw. But then Saturday came around 10 a.m. Just as I was dragging the trash bins back from the curb, they pulled up in their car. I didn't even have time to pretend I wasn't home. They got out like nothing had happened. My mom was holding a potted plant, some kind of lavender thing, and my dad had a shiny new soccer ball tucked under his arm. He smiled and said something about the weather. My mom held up the plant and called it a peace offering. Then my dad said they were thinking of taking the kids to the park. Then, Nathan was already there with Jeremy. And wouldn't it be nice for the cousins to play together? I stood still, my hands still on the trash bin. I told them we had plans. My dad dropped the act first. His face hardened. He said they were getting tired of coming by all the time and getting nothing in return. Said it was clear I didn't want peace, that I was still stuck in the past. My mom followed, said they had done more than enough lately. Gifts, visits, time. She said I needed to let go of whatever I was holding on to. Then she asked again about the car. Not directly, just, "So what's happening with it? Are you still deciding?" That's when I lost the last bit of patience I had. I told them I never wanted things to be like this, that I tried for years to be seen. And when they didn't see me, I tried even harder for them to see my kids. And still nothing. I said if this was all just some campaign to get a reward, then it could stop right now. The keys were off the table. I told them flat out if they wanted to be in my kids' lives, they were welcome. But if they were only here because they thought a car might fall into their laps, they could leave. And they did. But not before my dad turned back and said, "You know what, Kurt? You've made this so much harder than it needed to be." I didn't say a word. Monday came. Then Tuesday. No calls, no visits. The silence felt familiar now, and this time I knew it was permanent. Then I found out through a neighbor, because of course it was a neighbor, that my parents had told people I'd refused to reconnect, that I'd pushed them away after they tried so hard. Jeremy backed up the story, said I had issues with the family, said I was still bitter. And that's when the gifts stopped for the kids. Not just the visits, everything. My daughter's birthday came and went. No card, no call. My son asked if Grandma forgot him. I didn't know how to answer that without breaking something inside me. I caught myself staring at the car again that night. I'd been so proud when I bought it. Worked overtime, saved every extra dollar, skipped vacations. It wasn't even for me. That was the worst part. It never had been. Now it was just parked there doing nothing. Just a reminder. I started looking up return policies. I didn't expect them to vanish completely, but they did. One day they were showing up with picture books and promises. The next, they were gone like they'd never existed. No more texts, no calls, no awkward attempts to drop off leftovers or ask about the kids' school projects. They went silent and stayed that way. At first, I thought they were just regrouping, maybe trying a new angle. But weeks passed. My daughter's birthday came. Nothing. No, oops, we forgot. Not even a Facebook post. That's when it really hit the kids. My daughter asked me that night if Grandma was mad at her. I told her the truth, that none of this was her fault. That sometimes grown-ups make strange decisions when they don't get what they want. But I could tell she didn't really understand. How could she? The funny thing was their absence felt almost louder than their presence had. There was no family left now. Jeremy and I weren't speaking. My parents were doing God knows what, pretending I didn't exist. The only ones who never changed were the kids. Still happy. Still asking questions I couldn't answer. The car was still in the driveway. I'd started the paperwork to return it. Of course, the dealership took it back with a fee. 10% off the top gone. Just like that. It hurt more than I thought it would. Not just the money, the meaning behind it. That something I worked so hard for ended up being just another burned bridge. 2 days after the return, they showed up again. Of course, they did. My dad stood on the porch like nothing had happened. No knock. No call. Just rang the bell and waited. I opened the door. He didn't ask how I was. Didn't ask about the kids. He just said they needed help. For $1,000. No explanation, no details. Just that. Said it calmly, like he was asking for a favor from an old friend. I looked at him and felt nothing. No guilt, no urge to solve anything. Just an overwhelming clarity. I said no. Without thinking twice, he looked at me for a second longer, then turned around and left. No argument, no anger, just the quiet sound of him stepping off the porch and walking away. Then he slammed the door behind him. Not hard, but hard enough to make a point. I haven't heard from either of them since. The kids still ask questions now and then, but less and less. And I never quite know what to say. I don't want to poison their view of family, but I won't lie to them either. Some nights I lie awake thinking maybe I should have just given them the car. Maybe it would have been easier, but that thought doesn't last long. They made their choice a long time ago, and now I've made mine. I didn't notice it right away. The peace. At first, I mistook it for just silence, like after a storm when you're still waiting for thunder that never comes. Then one morning, I realized no one had mentioned them in weeks. No calls, no knocks, no Facebook posts tagged with guilt. Not even passive-aggressive comments through mutual friends. It was like they'd finally accepted it. Or maybe they just got tired of pretending. And life somehow didn't collapse. The kids were doing great. My daughter had a new friend at school and was learning how to braid her own hair. My son joined the school's chess club and beat a 5th grader in his 2nd week. I was there for all of it. Every science fair, every game night, every dentist appointment. No one canceled last minute. No one pretended they forgot. I still had moments where the weight of everything tried to sneak back in. Mostly late at night when the house was quiet and I glanced at that one drawer where the car keys used to be. The memory of the car wasn't even about the money anymore. It was what it symbolized. That I thought love could be earned with enough effort, enough sacrifice. And then one Tuesday, karma finally tapped on their shoulder. A buddy of mine from work whose wife is friends with Jeremy's wife told me they were having serious financial problems. Apparently, my parents had co-signed a loan for Jeremy, a business venture or a renovation flip or whatever trendy term he used for chasing money without a plan. The thing went south fast. The contractor skipped town. The buyer bailed. Suddenly, they were deep underwater. My parents tried to get Jeremy to cover it, but he was already pulling out. And without any leverage over him, they were stuck. House payments, overdue taxes, penalties. They started liquidating things. Stopped going out. Even missed Nathan's birthday party, according to Facebook, which I could still see through my daughter's account. I didn't laugh. I didn't smile, but I didn't feel sorry either. Then 2 weeks later, they showed up. It was early evening. I was cooking dinner. My mom was the one who rang the bell this time. She looked thinner, a little older, no makeup, no forced expression. She didn't ask about the kids. She didn't offer a hug. She just stood there and said they were going through something hard and that if I could help, maybe $4,000, it would really make a difference. She said it was only until they could sort things out. Said I'd get it back, of course. I asked her if she remembered the last time she asked me for money. If she remembered deleting me from the family page and posting a cake my children made with a caption that made it look like I chose not to be there. If she remembered the Christmases with Nathan's face front and center while my kids didn't even get a tag. She didn't respond. I told her she didn't need to explain anything else, that I hoped things would work out for them, but that I wasn't the bank. Not anymore, and definitely not for people who only showed up when things were burning down. Then I closed the door. No yelling, no slammed fists, no final insults. She just turned around and walked back to the car slowly, like she wasn't expecting it to work, but had to try anyway. I didn't hear from either of them after that. Jeremy hasn't said a word to me in over a year. They went full silent, like someone unplugged their connection to our lives. There were no more family dinners, no photos, no updates. Even the occasional secondhand gossip dried up. I don't think they even bothered to mention my name when talking to people. Now, the kids noticed at first, but eventually the questions stopped. They still have their moments, like when my daughter asked why we don't have big family dinners like her friend Lucy does, or when my son said he barely remembers Grandpa's voice. I tell them the truth I can live with. Some families grow apart. Not because they want to, but because someone kept forcing the distance until it became permanent. Now it's just us. And weirdly, that's enough. We're okay. We laugh. We argue about what movie to watch. We eat bad pancakes on Saturday mornings and good cereal for dinner when we're too tired to cook. They lost us, and that's on them. It had been about 6 weeks since my mom came to the door asking for money. Since then, nothing. Not a text, not a voicemail, not even a fake birthday card addressed to the grandkids. I'd accepted that as the new normal, and honestly, it was working. Then something strange happened. It was a Tuesday afternoon, one of those ordinary days where nothing really happens. I was sorting the mail, bills, grocery flyers, junk, and then I saw it. A cream-colored envelope with no return address. The handwriting on the front wasn't familiar. Neat but shaky. I opened it, expecting a fake charity flyer or maybe some local campaign. It wasn't that. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper and a photo. The photo was old, definitely from a disposable camera. It was me, probably around 11, standing at a community center birthday party. There were balloons, a half-eaten cake, and my dad awkwardly crouched behind me. My mom was off to the side, barely in the frame. The note just said, "I found this while cleaning the garage. Thought you might want it. That was a good day, Dad." No apology, no questions, just that. It felt off. Not sad. Not warm. Just random. Like someone trying to tug on a memory they didn't even help build. I showed it to the kids that evening. My daughter asked why Grandpa would send that after not talking to us anymore. I didn't have an answer. My son looked at the photo and said, "You look kind of lonely." He wasn't wrong. I put the picture away in a drawer. I didn't respond. I'm not even sure they wanted a response, but it made me wonder. Why now? Why that photo? And why send it anonymously like it was some kind of message in a bottle? I don't know what they're playing at, but I've learned not to be surprised anymore. Now on to the next story. Story 7. Parents missed my graduation, but remember to bill me for my brother's Vegas bachelor weekend. $2,740, your share for flights plus suite. I sent back $2.74 with the note. Didn't gamble, not paying. Then froze the shared card, flagged every charge, and revoked all linked accounts. By morning, I got a notice. All guest access removed by account owner. At 9:13 a.m., my sister texted, "The hotel won't let us in." What did you do? I was the only one whose family didn't show up. You notice that kind of thing even if you try not to. Every name that got called was followed by cheers, whistles, someone standing on their seat trying to film on a shaky phone. Every row had flowers, hugs, proud tears. I had the empty space, a cold folding chair with my last name taped to the back. No one sitting in it. My friends tried to cover for it. They were loud as hell when my name came up, even louder than they were for their own. They made a whole scene shouting my name, lifting their phones up like I was graduating summa cum rock star. I appreciated it. I smiled for the pictures. I held the diploma with both hands, but under it all, I felt it. The thing is, I knew they weren't coming. They told me 3 days before. Said Ethan's bachelor party in Vegas was already booked, non-refundable, everything paid in advance. Mom said it's just a ceremony, Bree. What matters is that we're proud of you. I said nothing. I didn't even argue anymore. That was always how it worked with them. Ethan got the spotlight, Rachel got the sympathy, and I got silence and invoices. After the ceremony, a few of us hit a bar down the street that gave free drinks to graduates. I sat there with my gown still on, beer in hand, friends all around. They toasted to me harder than anyone else. One of them joked, "You're the only one who made it here without a cheering squad. Respect." We all laughed. It wasn't bitter, just honest. I was waiting for my Uber when I got the message. A Venmo request from my dad. $2,740. The note said, "Vegas Bachelor Bash your share." I stared at it for a second, then laughed. See, back when I got my first credit card in college, my dad convinced me to add him as a joint user, just in case something happens to you or us. Emergency stuff only. It sounded reasonable at the time. He even paid it a few times when I was short, but I didn't know he'd kept it, and I didn't know they were using it for Vegas. I checked the charges. $869 for a suite at the Venetian, $345 for bottle service, 2 flights, a group dinner, matching t-shirts that said, "Ethan's Last Ride," Uber Lux Rides, even a charge from a strip club just labeled entertainment. I didn't reply to the request. I sent back $2.74 with a note. Didn't play, didn't pay. Then I got to work. I logged into the card account and froze it. I reported every charge I didn't make, which was nearly all of them. I flagged the big ones first, then the ones that annoyed me the most. Room service breakfast at a rooftop pool, a private tour of the Grand Canyon that was clearly code for something else, and a ridiculous $42 charge for sunglasses that said, "Groom Squad." I changed every password, removed every linked account, revoked guest access, even locked them out of the shared Apple ID. No more music, no more photos, no more family calendar reminders. They wanted to use me for a good time. They could have the hangover, too. The next morning, I got an email from the bank. The account owner has blocked guest access. At 9:13 a.m., Rachel texted me. "The hotel won't let us in. What did you do?" I didn't respond. Instead, I posted a photo from the ceremony. Me and my cap and gown surrounded by my friends. Caption, "Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who shows up." They missed my graduation. Left me alone on the biggest day of my life to party on my dime. I wasn't done yet. By noon the next day, I had 6 missed calls and 3 voicemails from my mom. I didn't bother opening them. I already knew the script. Guilt, deflection, maybe a line or two about how this is family and family doesn't keep score. Except they did. They kept it in spreadsheets and sent invoices. The 4th voicemail came from my dad. "No greeting, just you need to fix this, Brian. You're acting like a child. Call me back now." He hung up before the beep. I sat on my bed in the apartment I was about to move out of, surrounded by boxes, my cap still hanging from the door handle, and I realized this wasn't even about the money. It was about how easily they decided I didn't matter. My graduation was an inconvenience, a conflict in their party itinerary. I opened the credit card account again. The fraud investigation was already moving. They had flagged and temporarily reversed the bigger charges, hotel suites, flights, club tabs. The bank sent a confirmation email saying they'd review the flagged expenses and keep my account restricted until it was resolved. Then I checked the notifications on my phone. "Ethan, dude, the hotel just froze the deposit. Said there was a payment issue. We had to move to a double room. It's embarrassing." He followed it with, "You couldn't wait a day." I took a screenshot and moved on. Rachel jumped in not long after. "You're being petty. Everyone's miserable. We had to cancel the dinner reservation. The restaurant wanted a card on file. What's your problem?" That message did it. Not the content, the tone. As if I was the one who ruined things, as if I hadn't been completely cut out of their celebration plans and then handed the bill like some afterthought donor. I texted back 2 words for the first time since this started. "Not my problem." Then I blocked her. By evening, the messages from my parents were slowing down, but new ones started rolling in from relatives. An aunt I hadn't heard from in years messaged me. "Brian, honey, please don't let this bachelor party nonsense come between you and your parents. They were just trying to include you." Include me? That's what they called using my credit to fund someone else's celebration while pretending I didn't exist. That night, I went over everything again, not just the card. Everything. The phone plan's still under Dad's name. I switched it that night, paid the balance, ported my number to my own account. Streaming services gone, changed every password. I'd been the one paying for most of them anyway. If they wanted to watch reruns of Suits, they could open their own tabs. Even the family cloud storage filled with years of pictures and documents I didn't care about anymore. I nuked my access and wiped the shared folders. Then came the insurance. I had a car under the family policy. I made a few calls and split my policy. More expensive on my own maybe, but worth it. By the next morning, I was untethered. Every cord they had wrapped around me, every little bit of control they hung on to by calling it shared or joint was gone. That's when the real meltdown started. My dad called again. "This isn't a game, Brian. You're jeopardizing your mother's credit. Fix it now." That voicemail I played twice just to hear the edge of panic I hadn't heard from him in years. Then I deleted it. At 10:04 a.m., my cousin Josh texted me. "Bro, they're freaking out in the family group chat. Rachel's calling it financial abuse, like against her." I laughed for the first time in days. It wasn't even funny. It was just so on brand. I didn't even need to exaggerate it. They were doing the work for me. The crazy part, I hadn't even touched what came next. I wasn't looking to get even. I was looking to make a point that stuck. They made me invisible. They humiliated me. Now they were going to watch what it felt like to be on the outside. And this time, no one was sending an invite back in. The silence was the best part. After days of messages, missed calls, and guilt-laced voicemails, everything just stopped. Not a peep from my parents, not a comment from Ethan, not even a passive-aggressive meme from Rachel. It was like they thought if they ignored me long enough, I'd come crawling back, that I'd regret overreacting, that I'd miss them. But I didn't. I felt lighter, sharper, like I could finally breathe without checking for strings tied to someone else's expectations. Then 2 weeks after graduation, I got the wedding invitation. Ethan and his fiancée Madison were getting married in August. Big venue in Lake Tahoe. Black tie, family only for the rehearsal dinner. And in the bottom corner of the invite, please RSVP by July 1st. Hotel info attached. Travel not included. Taped to the invite was a separate envelope. Inside was a bill, a literal invoice, itemizing my outstanding contribution for the bachelor party. $1, $8.26. After disputed charges, a handwritten note underneath said, "Let's not make this weird." I stared at the paper like it might catch fire on its own. They hadn't just forgotten my graduation. They had turned around and sent me a payment reminder like I was a client who missed the due date. And now they wanted me to dress up, smile for pictures, and clap politely at Ethan's wedding like none of it happened. So, I RSVP'd, no. And then I booked a room at the same hotel for the same weekend on my own dime just to be close enough for what came next. First, I sent a tip to the wedding venue anonymously using a fake email and a burner number. Might want to confirm payment methods. Groom's family has a history of using cards without permission. Then I sent the same tip to the hotel front desk. I wasn't done. Madison had a wedding website with their story, registry, RSVP links, the usual. I found a typo and emailed the site owner pretending to be her cousin offering to help fix it. They sent me editing access, no questions asked. I didn't change anything major, just added a small line on the front page under Our Journey. It said, "Ethan has always been surrounded by love, generosity, and at least one stolen credit card. That one only stayed up for a few hours before someone caught it, but the screen grab is permanent." By the end of the week, Ethan messaged me again. "You really think this is funny? Grow up." I didn't reply. I just posted a throwback photo from graduation on Instagram. Same friends around me. All smiles with the caption, "Best day of my life. Not one regret." Then I blocked him too. They still thought this was about the money, about the card. It wasn't. It was about how they decided my biggest moment wasn't worth showing up for, but still found a way to make it about them. It was about years of being the background character in a family that only cared when I was footing the bill. And now they could see what it felt like when I wasn't there at all. I didn't go to the wedding, but I went to the hotel. I booked a room 2 floors above the suite they reserved for the rehearsal dinner. Not because I wanted to spy. I didn't care enough for that. I just wanted them to know I was there, that I could show up now, too, on my own terms. I walked through the lobby the night before the wedding, clean-shaved, buttoned down, carrying nothing but a duffel. I saw Madison's mom at the front desk complaining about the lack of extra room keys. I don't think she recognized me. But when Ethan stepped off the elevator and made eye contact with me for half a second before turning away, that was enough. I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I just walked past him and tapped my room card like I'd never known him. That night, I left a card at the hotel concierge desk addressed to Madison. No return name, just a simple white envelope with a printed note inside. It read, "You deserve to know the bachelor party you thanked everyone for was funded with a card your husband didn't own. He didn't pay it back. He billed his brother. He missed that brother's graduation to be in Vegas. Ask him what else he hasn't told you. Congratulations and good luck." I didn't stay to see what happened. I went to a bar across town and met up with a couple of friends who were in Tahoe for the weekend. We drank, played pool, and laughed like none of it mattered anymore. When I got back to the hotel at 1:30 in the morning, there was a voicemail waiting. It was Madison. "I don't know what kind of sick game you're playing, Brian, but I'm not going to let you ruin this for me." She hung up. The next morning, the hotel had a staff memo quietly posted at the front desk. "Please verify identity for all room key requests due to a guest privacy issue." Ethan tried to play it cool. He posted a picture on Instagram of him and Madison holding hands under an arch of flowers with the caption, "Nothing can ruin this day." But the comments were off, and two of his groomsmen didn't show up. Word had started to spread. One of them had already reached out to me, said they had no idea I hadn't been invited, that he wouldn't have gone if he knew what really happened. He refunded me for one of the Vegas charges out of his own pocket. I didn't ask him to. That weekend ended with Ethan and Madison leaving the hotel early. No after-party, no brunch, just silence. My room checkout was quiet, no drama. I handed in the key, smiled at the front desk clerk, and walked out like a guest who'd come for nothing more than the view. They had no idea what was coming next because I had saved something for after the honeymoon. I gave them time. 2 weeks after the wedding, I figured they were back home. Honeymoon photos had stopped. The congratulatory comments dried up. Rachel went back to posting motivational quotes. My parents had gone quiet on Facebook, a sure sign that something wasn't sitting right. So I chose my moment. I didn't hack anything. I didn't break any laws. I just forwarded facts. An email to the HR department at the real estate company Ethan had just joined, his proud new job. He posted about it all over LinkedIn. Ready to grow? Ready to serve? Or something equally self-congratulatory. I attached copies of the disputed charges, the frozen card report, and the formal claim letter from the bank. The subject line was neutral, corporate-sounding, potential financial misconduct linked to recent hire. I kept the message simple. "Hi, I'm reaching out anonymously to inform you that a recent hire, Ethan Marks, may have used a family member's credit account without permission for a bachelor party trip involving several thousand in charges. These expenses are currently under investigation by the issuing bank. This may not be relevant to his work, but I thought you might want to be aware. No further contact needed. No accusations. No threats. No name attached. Just enough to make someone in that office lean back in their chair and think, who did we just hire?" I didn't stop there. Rachel had been talking nonstop about law school for over a year. Everyone in the family knew which 2 schools she was obsessed with. I'd seen the bookmarks on her laptop over Thanksgiving. She never logged out. I submitted anonymous ethics concerns to both schools, short notes through the official portals referencing her proximity to an unresolved financial dispute involving misuse of funds and manipulation of family accounts. I didn't even need to explain it fully. That's the thing about law schools. The moment there's a question of character, the file moves to a different pile. Maybe nothing would come of it, or maybe someone would Google her name next to mine. Either way, a shadow would be there now. While those seeds were growing roots, I posted the story. Not here, somewhere else. A popular subreddit under a throwaway. I told the whole thing, not in perfect detail, but enough. How my parents skipped my graduation, used my card, sent me a bill, how I cut them off, how I let the fallout unfold. It caught fire. Thousands of people responded. It went viral within a day. Comments rolled in by the hundreds. Support, disbelief, outrage. People were sharing it across platforms. A few tried to guess how it ended. One or two got close. Most didn't. Then came the messages. Someone sent me a DM asking if the story was real. Another asked if I ever forgave them. Someone else said, "You're my hero. I wish I had the guts to do the same." I didn't reply to any of them. Then Ethan reached out. A voice message this time. Longer than usual. No anger. Just this calm, fake, understanding voice. "Look, I know you're upset, but what you're doing, sending emails, interfering with people's jobs, that's not okay. We've all made mistakes, but this is going to follow us for a long time. You need to think about what kind of person you want to be. This isn't justice. It's personal." He paused before adding, "And it's hurting Mom." That part almost made me laugh. I saved the message and didn't reply. 3 days later, I got a letter in the mail from my mother. A real letter, blue ink on cheap white paper. She said what I expected. The family was not the same anymore. That I had made my point and that it's time to let go before this does more damage. That last line stuck. Before this does more damage. Like I was the one who broke something that wasn't already cracked in half. They still didn't get it. They thought I was lashing out because I was bitter. They thought I was overreacting. But this wasn't overreaction. This was me learning how to take back what they thought I'd always hand over. My money, my time, my silence. They made me feel small, like I didn't count. Now, for the first time, they had to live in the space they built without me in it. And that space was starting to echo. By the end of summer, the silence had changed. Not the same cold shoulder from before. This was something different. No more guilt trips. No more backhanded apologies. Just absence. Like they weren't sure how to speak to me anymore. I heard from a cousin that Ethan was under review at work. Nothing official, but people were whispering. A few deals he was supposed to close got reassigned. Apparently, someone in the office had recognized part of the story from Reddit. Rachel still hadn't posted anything about law school. Her account was private now. Every time I checked, it had fewer followers. And my parents, the ones who used to blast every family gathering across Facebook, quiet. No new posts, no tagged photos, just a blurry selfie from a neighborhood brunch that looked like it was trying too hard. It would have been easy to walk away completely, start a new life with clean lines and no loose ends. But I didn't want clean. I wanted closure. So, I went back once Thanksgiving. I didn't tell them I was coming. I knew they were still doing dinner at the house. My name wasn't on the group text invite. My cousin forwarded it to me anyway. And I knew they wouldn't expect to see me after everything that had happened. I showed up 30 minutes late. Wore black. No explanation. No hello. When I walked in, conversation stopped. My mom froze in the kitchen. Ethan was already seated halfway through carving the turkey. Rachel had a glass of wine in her hand and looked like she'd seen a ghost. No one spoke first, so I did. "All I want is the card, the original. I'm here to take it back." That was the condition I decided on. I'd never destroy them. I didn't want police reports or lawsuits. I just wanted to make it clear what was mine was mine. What they took, I was taking back. My dad got up without a word, went to the drawer by the microwave, the one where they always kept spare keys, batteries, and the card in question. He handed it to me without looking at me. I nodded, put it in my coat pocket. Then I turned to leave. My mom said my name once, just Brian. I didn't answer. Before I walked out the door, I stopped and said one more thing. No drama, no anger. You chose him. You always did. That's fine. But you don't get to spend my future on your guilt. Then I left. I spent that night with friends. We ordered takeout, played video games, and laughed until 3 a.m. I haven't spoken to my family since. And here's the thing, I don't regret any of it. They thought I'd break. That I'd come crawling back because family is forever. But some families don't fall apart. They're built broken. And sometimes the only way to survive is to finally stop pretending that's your fault. Update. About 4.5 months after I walked out of that house on Thanksgiving, I got an email I didn't expect. It was from a nonprofit I had applied to over a year earlier, back when I was still deep in finals and just blindly sending out resumes. They said they had a new opening and my name had stayed on their short list. It wasn't the most glamorous position. Community outreach, event planning, a little admin work. But the tone of the email was warm, human. I accepted without overthinking it. The move came fast. I packed up and left the city I grew up in within 2 weeks. Landed in a smaller city with no ties to anything familiar. The apartment is small, second floor, creaky stairs, but it's mine. Nobody else has a spare key. My job isn't high-paying, but I don't dread Mondays. I meet people every day who've had rougher starts, and none of them care where I came from. I go to bed tired, but not the kind of tired that comes from people-pleasing. The kind of tired that means the day mattered. No one here knows my last name. That's been a gift. Ethan tried once more in January. Sent me a podcast episode called Rebuilding Relationships After Conflict. No text, no context, just a link. I didn't click it. I forwarded it to a friend with the subject line, "Oh no, Rachel's still stuck. I heard from a cousin she's taking paralegal courses instead now," calling it a strategic pivot. She still posts filtered coffee shots with captions about the grind. I guess some things haven't changed. My parents haven't tried again. No more letters, no messages, not even a forwarded birthday meme. Either they finally accepted it or they're regrouping. But the silence feels real this time. I didn't go full scorched earth. I could have taken legal action, pushed the fraud case harder, maybe even involved the police. I didn't, not because I was protecting them, but because I didn't want to stay in that war. I wanted out. And honestly, the most unexpected part has been how okay I've been with that. I still get moments. A scent in the grocery store that smells like my mom's candles or a stranger's laugh that sounds like my dad's when he used to actually laugh. I'll feel it for a second and then it's gone, like muscle memory fading out. The real win was seeing who stayed. My friends, the ones who shouted my name at graduation, who helped me pack boxes, who invited me to their parents' houses for holidays without making it a big deal. They never left. We still talk almost every day. 2 of them are driving out to visit me next month. They don't need a reason. They just want to see me. It's weird how life keeps going even after you think it's cracked beyond repair. You find new patterns, new people, new places to stand that don't shake when you lean on them. No dramatic reunion, no tears, no Instagram captions about healing. Just life. Quiet, stable, unexpectedly decent. And that's more than enough. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.